Chapter 106. As she wishes. Qin Lu desperately struggled, however his eyes soon became expressionless, his consciousness disappearing. He coldly asked, "Tell me, why did Madame Naylan order me to return?" Qin Lu opened his expressionless eyes wide while answering, "Madame didn't want to let the second Miss marry the young master of the Zhu family, but second Miss's reputation has already been ruined and the Zhu family is refusing to let the matter go. So Madame thought of letting the plum tree wither in place of the peach tree, by getting the third Miss to replace the second Miss in marrying the young master of the Zhu family. They would then tell everyone that the young master of the Zhu family had made a mistake, that the person who admired young master Zhu and stripped him was actually the third Miss from Naylan Manor. If this were to happen, then the Naylan family and the Zhu family would still be related by marriage, and the second Miss's reputation also wouldn't be damaged. So it's like this." The corner of Heshi's mouth raised into a sneer. "Zhu Zhongba is a cruel yet stupid fatty, moreover, he's also a womanizer. How was Madame Naylan going to ensure that I agreed to be married off as Naylan Feishua's replacement?" Qin Lu responded, "I don't know. All Si Lu said was that Madame already had an absolutely sure method so that the third Miss would get married, even if she wasn't willing." After Heshi heard all the information Qin Lu had to give, she withdrew her invisible needles, then threw him off to the side. Shi Jia bowed before Heshi. "Young master, do you need me to clean this up?" Heshi nodded, and watching Shi Jia drag the disabled Qin Lu away like a dead dog, her eyes didn't show the slightest trace of emotion. Once she turned her head, she came into contact with Bai Hu's shocked gaze. "Miss Naylan, aren't you without a cultivation base? How are you able to control a person's consciousness?" Heshi returned to her seat, and picking up the tea once more, she drank a mouthful before faintly saying, "Have you forgotten what my job is? As long as you're familiar with the human body structure, you'll naturally be able to control other people as you wish." Bai Hu's heart trembled with fear. His whole body was taut, and the admiration and fear in his eyes became more pronounced. "Right. Miss Naylan is the genius doctor that cured the meridian fractures of the Ouyang family's young master. Of course an insignificant person like Qin Lu wouldn't enter her eyes. But as an ordinary person who lacked a cultivation base, just relying on knowledge of the human body to control a martial artist's mind, Miss Naylan is really too shocking. Mustn't say it out loud though, it would shock everyone under heaven. Ah, really a person worthy of master taking a fancy to them." Thinking of this, Bai Hu stared at Heshi with a gaze brimming with passion, and eagerly said, "Naylan Manor's people actually dared to bully Miss, and now they even want to deceive Miss into marrying that nuisance, that young master from the Zhu family. For that crime they ought to die 10,000 times. It would be better to let me go to properly give them a lesson, letting them know that they shouldn't overestimate their capabilities again." Heshi smiled a chilling smile as she glanced at him, causing the watching Bai Hu to become scared. Shaking her head, she said, "It's not necessary, I've already decided to go back to Naylan Manor. Doesn't Madame Naylan want me married to Zhu Zhongba? I can do as she wishes, moreover, I'll properly repay her kindness." "How can that be possible?" Bai Hu roared, his face anxious as he said, "Master definitely won't allow you to marry another person, you are masters." Under Heshi's cold gaze he automatically fell silent, even retreating back 2 steps due to fear. Bai Hu's heart was full of grief. Obviously he is an expert on gold core stage, yet why when he confronts Miss Naylan who lacks a cultivation base, does he always feel that his imposing manner means nothing to her? Instead, he would even be filled with a slight trace of fear. Heshi ordered Shaoli to pack the food for Bai Hu, then coldly snorted as she said, "Whoever I marry, it's up to me to choose. People who disappear without a trace, neglecting to inform me beforehand, what qualifications do they have to control my decisions?" Chapter 107. I'll go back with you. As soon as she finished speaking, instead of letting Bai Hu continue stammering as he thought of what he could say, he was ruthlessly driven out of the courtyard. After dealing with Qin Lu and sending Bai Hu away, Heshi didn't immediately return to her room. Rather, she chose to continue sitting in the yard, calmly waiting. An hour later, as expected, someone came to visit this remote courtyard. It was Nayland Manor's butler, Wang Zhong. From his appearance, it seemed that Wang Zhong was no more than a simple and honest middle-aged man, possibly somewhere between 30 to 40 years old. With thick eyebrows framing big eyes, it would be easy to think that he was unsophisticated judging by what he was wearing. In reality though, his cultivation base is the highest amongst the slaves in Nayland Manor. He had already reached the peak of the foundation establishment stage, and soon, he would be able to break through to the meridian stage. As he walked over, his gaze swept over the pool of blood on the ground, his eyebrows wrinkling slightly. In the courtyard there still remained the aura of an expert far higher than himself, causing fear to rise within Wang Zhong. While he was looking around, his gaze finally landed on Heshi, who was still leisurely drinking tea, and the suspicion in his eyes became more pronounced. This is that legendary incompetent and cowardly third miss of Nayland Manor who was judged as trash and driven away. Yet seeing her appearance now, although she was malnourished and sickly, without a trace of spiritual power, the expression in her eyes was radiant. Where does she resemble a weak and cowardly person? Could it be said that because there's an expert who's supporting this third miss from behind the scenes, that she was able to be so arrogant? Even Qin Lu had suffered under her evil scheme. Humph. She really has an exaggerated opinion of her abilities for a young girl. Did she think that just because she had managed to find a patron that she would be able to confront Nayland Manor? This being said, it's only an ordinary person who would be taken advantage of. Wang Zhong's heart was full of disdain, but on the surface he acted respectful. This old slave has come carrying Madame's order. Third miss, please return back to the manor. Heshi placed the cup of tea down, lightly laughing. If I don't return? Wang Zhong's eyes narrowed, and without any warning, severe power was suddenly flowing from his body. The power pressure belonged to a high-level martial artist, causing the complexions of Zhang San, Shi Jia, and the others who were originally guarding Heshi, to change. Some of them with a relatively weak cultivation base even felt their knees turn soft as they fell to the ground with a thump. Even Heshi's complexion somewhat paled, her body sitting beside the table stone slightly trembling. Wang Zhong became pleased as he looked at these weak people. They were like ants as they trembled in front of him. Slowly, he withdrew his spiritual power. A respectful smile was still plastered across his face, but his eyes showed his contempt and a promise for violence. This old slave came with Madame's order. I must bring third miss back. If third miss insists on being disagreeable, then this old slave will have no choice but to tie third miss up and return with you bound like that. Heshi slightly lowered her eyes, the expression on her small shallow face unreadable. Yet, as if she was intimidated and fearful, you could see her hair slightly trembling. After a long while, Wang Zhong finally heard her quiet voice, "Okay, I'll go back with you." Wang Zhong nodded his head in satisfaction. His opinion of Heshi had lowered even more, and he now firmly believed that she was still just a coward and incompetent trash. At most, she only hugged a thigh that wasn't thick enough. It was simply too weak to be feared. As for Qin Lu, who knew whether he was killed or injured? He was trash with no strength that only knew how to flatter people. No one in the manor was worried about his life or death. Heshi was just about to jump into the carriage that Wang Zhong had arranged, when from behind, wet Nurse Chen anxiously called out to her, Miss, let this old slave and Xiaoli accompany you back. In the future, you shall stand in Nayland Manor, becoming a genuine young Mississippi. What will you do if you don't have a wet nurse and servant girl beside you?" Wet Nurse Chen's eyes were full of hope, as if longing for Heshi to become a miss of Nayland Manor so that she could have a promising future. The corner of Heshi's mouth revealed the trace of a cold smile as she slowly said, "Since wet nurse wants to go with me, then I'll bring you. Xiaoli, you stay here to continue monitoring the training of Shi Jia and the others. Wait here until I come back." Chapter 108, Madame Nayland Xiaoli promptly answered yes, not doubting Heshi's orders at all. Without waiting for wet Nurse Chen to respond, Heshi quickly pulled her into the carriage. Since wet nurse still had delusions about Nayland Manor and her cheap father, then this time she'll give wet nurse's naive hopes the opportunity to vanish. In Yanjing City, As one of the four great families, Naylan Manor's reputation could be described as outstanding. When you add to this that Naylan Zhengze is the highest-ranking doctor in all of Jinling Kingdom, and that he's a junior member of the Doctors Association, many people would beseech Naylan Zhengze for treatment. Therefore, since Murong Yaru, now Madame Naylan, had married into the Naylan family, she had been enjoying the admiration and envy of others as part of a noble family. Wherever she went, people would fawn upon her, giving her respect. However, Madame Naylan had recently been worried about the rumors surrounding Naylan Feishue, giving her white hair. Spending all day inside Naylan Manor, she didn't dare go out to attend any parties. This is because the rumors about Naylan Feishue had now spread throughout all of Yanjing City, causing the Naylan family to look like a joke. What? Naylan Feishue took a fancy to the young master of the Zhu family, and failing to seduce him, she used force. What? Naylan Feishue's innocence was taken by the young master of the Zhu family, so due to rage out of humiliation, she whipped the young master of the Zhu family to vent her anger. The rumors continued like this, and they were now known by everyone. Madame Naylan had educated Naylan Feishue herself as she grew up, so if Naylan Feishue's reputation was ruined, wouldn't it be said that she, Murong Yaru, had failed to teach her daughter well? Wouldn't this affect the future of her son and older daughter later on? This is what Madame Naylan couldn't bear about the whole situation. However, the Zhu family insisted that the one who stripped Zhu Zhongba was Naylan Feishue. They even produced Naylan Feishue's personal token, and that personal token's design had made an uproar in Yanjing City, so Naylan Manor was unable to deny it. Unfortunately, as it happened, her daughter, Naylan Feishue, was currently on a journey to train and wasn't at home. So even if she wanted her daughter to personally explain what had happened, there was no way it was achievable. Not to mention, with Madame Naylan's understanding of her daughter, it's possible that she really might have done such a thing. Finally, after being reminded by wet nurse who is always beside her, Madame Naylan thought of using the concubine's daughter, Naylan Heshi. That girl who had been abandoned at the outside courtyard for over 10 years. Thinking of Naylan Heshi, Madame Naylan also unavoidably recalled that woman. With a stunning appearance that could overturn the world, a noble and cold temperament, and arrogant eyes that overlooked anyone who came near. She was obviously only a concubine, yet her manner was like that of a flower growing on a high mountain. Even her own husband wasn't in her sight. Until today, every time Madame Naylan thought of that woman's indifferent expression when looking at her, she would become so angry that she trembled all over. Yet Madame Naylan's husband had loved that woman so much and was extremely respectful towards her. Even more, he hadn't allowed anyone to get close to her or harm her. She was a shameless slut who seduced men. Why should she have had to treat her well? Keep dreaming. Fortunately, after that woman had given birth to a daughter, she had died. Moreover, that daughter is an ugly person that is unable to cultivate, completely not inheriting even a little bit of her character and beauty. This lowly kind of daughter, before she could hinder her path, it's better to get rid of her now. Thinking of this pleased her, causing a carefree and vicious smile to appear on Madame Naylan's face. It was just at this moment though that a servant came in to report, "Madam, third miss has arrived." Soon after, wearing a rough coat made for a man and without any sort of hairpin in her hair, a little girl accompanied by an old wet nurse unhurriedly entered the room. Chapter 109, Hypocritical Show of Affection. The girl looked to be about 16 to 17 years old, yet unlike the soft and fresh visage of a girl of that age, her skin was dry and sallow. Her gaze was turned down, clearly displaying her swollen eyelids and the obvious bags under her eyes. With these kinds of looks, even the servants in the manor were looked after better than her. If anyone were to say that she was the third miss from Naylan Manor, who would believe them? Just thinking about how much pain that woman in the underworld would feel if she knew this, if she could see her own daughter's miserable and petty appearance now, caused Madame Naylan's heart to surge with intense joy. But contrary to these emotions, the expression on Madame Naylan's face was one of distress, and in a noble manner she beckoned the girl closer. After examining Heshi up and down for a long while, she finally sighed, "You are Heshi? Poor child, how can you be so thin?" Saying so, Her sharp eyes swept over the people present and landed on Wang Zhong. Butler Wang, how have I instructed you all? Although third miss was sent to the other courtyard by old master, she's still a young miss of the Nayland family. All food and clothing expenses must be according to young miss's specifications. Yet look at her now. Why has she become so thin? In the end, did you send people who would serve third miss properly? Wang Zhong, who was somewhat terrified as he was being scolded, lowered his head and said, Madam, your words really wrong this old slave. We have always picked the best foods and materials to send to the other courtyard. There's never been a shortage of crystal stones or silver tail, but, Madam Nayland's long shapely eyebrows raised, but? You're not going to quickly say it. Wang Zhong answered while glancing slyly at wet nurse Chen, but, this is the first time this old slave personally went to visit the other courtyard, so it is only now that I've learnt that the slaves in that courtyard are all outrageous. They're not only not looking after third miss properly, they're also taking advantage of her and secretly deducting a lot of the food and clothing expenses. This is the reason why third miss has fallen to such a degree. Madame Nayland's eyes flashed, her gaze falling on wet nurse Chen as she stood behind He. Suddenly, she shouted loudly, such a daring old slave, still not kneeling down quickly. Wet nurse Chen was so scared by the shout that she was trembling, her face completely terrified. Two servants quickly approached, and standing on her left and right, they forced her to kneel. The corner of Madame Nayland's mouth raised slightly before quickly vanishing into a grief-filled expression, and she said in a disgusted tone, Wet nurse Chen, in the past when you harmed my Xian heir, I only punished you by letting people disable your cultivation base. You were sent to the other courtyard to atone for your crimes by properly serving third Mississippi. Yet, you actually haven't changed and neglected your care of third Mississippi. At that time I tolerated you, but this time, for my pitiful He, I definitely won't spare you. Servants, drag this wicked slave away and flog her 100 times, regardless of whether she lives or dies. Wet nurse Chen was currently an ordinary person without spiritual power. If she were to be flogged 100 times, she wouldn't be able to protect herself. Yes, dash. The two servants that were holding wet nurse Chen down replied loudly, and started to drag her out of the room. Wet nurse Chen suddenly returned to her senses and fiercely struggled, Madam, I didn't do it. I didn't harm young Master Xian. I didn't betray young miss. Don't believe these vicious lies attacking me. Wang Zhong coldly snorted from the side, when I went to the courtyard, I personally saw you ordering people about while acting all arrogant and bossy towards third Mississippi. You simply have no respect for third miss, and now you still dare to lie in front of Madam. Quickly drag her away. Wet nurse Chen struggled with all her might while shouting, but she was no match compared to the strength of the two servants. Her eyes slowly showed despair. Chapter 110, Nayland Manor's Demons, Wait. A clear and beautiful woman's voice suddenly sounded. That voice wasn't heavy and the tone was calm, but it echoed in everyone's ears, causing the two servants' movements to halt. He lifted her head, her tranquil and deep eyes looked at Madame Nayland's surprised expression, and the corner of her mouth lifted into a faint smile. It said that Madame Nayland is benevolent and noble, so why must He see a bloody scene on arrival? He's courage is small. If Nayland Manor is so terrible, I think I'll go back to my small courtyard and stay there. Madame Nayland's eyes opened wide. She couldn't believe that Nayland He actually had the guts to speak to her like this. Is this really Nayland He? He wasn't concerned with what Madame Nayland thought, and directly walking forward, she grabbed wet nurse Chen from the two servants and helped her to stand. The two servants felt their hands that were gripping wet nurse Chen tightly loosen. They didn't know how, but they suddenly felt pain in their elbows, and following that, their whole bodies became numb. Finding themselves unable to move even a single step, wet nurse Chen was easily taken from their hands. Wet nurse Chen's face was covered in tears, her expression full of remorse and guilt as she looked at He. It was at this moment that she finally realized, these people didn't receive her miss back to let her live comfortably, rather, it was because they wanted to push her into a pit of fire. She was so stupid, always pressuring Miss to return to Nayland Manor, and now she had actually put her Miss in danger. Miss, He patted her arm, and using her internal energy, her voice entered Wet Nurse Chen's ears. These demons, I simply don't care about them, I only needed Wet Nurse to understand this. Now, listen to my instructions, don't believe any of the people in this manor. This includes Nayland Jingzi, you must not believe him. Wet Nurse, can you do that? Wet Nurse Chen nodded repeatedly. How could she still believe the people in this manor after all of this? As she nodded her head in satisfaction, she didn't blame Wet Nurse Chen for wanting her to return to Nayland Manor. Because on the surface, it indeed seemed that Nayland Manor always gave material assistance these past years to Nayland He. As for being sent to the other courtyard where there was a lack of spiritual energy, since her meridians were broken, it would have no effect on her. In addition, Nayland Jingzi had passed down an order that no one was allowed to harm Nayland He's life. This had led to Wet Nurse Chen and the original Nayland He to have delusions about this father, believing that his decision was because he cared about their father-daughter bond. However, He snorted at this way of thinking. If he really cared about their father-daughter bond, would he have thrown away his own daughter to a remote area, never meeting her for many years, unconcerned about her welfare? Then the feelings of this father for his daughter were too cheap. As for not allowing anyone to harm Nayland He's life, that was most likely because she still had some value. Nayland Jingzi, this doctor, it seemed that he was very different from the kind and upright doctor that he portrayed. He turned around, and coming into contact with Madame Nayland's shocked expression, she couldn't help but lightly lift the corners of her mouth, revealing a faint smile. Madame Nayland's face twisted, yet in the next moment and with great difficulty, she managed to plaster a concerned and blame-filled expression back onto her face. You're still young, you don't understand how hateful that group of wicked slaves are, you were deceived by them. This Wet Nurse Chen is really too hateful, I can't feel assured if I were to let her stay beside you. If you want servants, this manor has many, I can even give you the servant I'm proudest of, Si Lu. Chapter 111, You won't blame me, right? He slightly raised her eyebrows and meaningfully said, What Madame said is correct, previously in the other courtyard, Butler Li and that group of slaves humiliated me every day. They would bully me for their amusement and said it was all Madame's order, but Wet Nurse Chen, as a slave from Nayland Manor, opposed Butler Li going against Madame's order, she put her own life at risk to protect me. This kind of dedicated slave, Nayland Manor still won't spare her. Hearing what was said, Madame Nayland's complexion changed and she sharply shouted, What nonsense are you talking about? How can I order people to bully you? Who taught you to be so ignorant of the relationships between people that you would slander an elder? He lightly laughed, This isn't talking nonsense, but let's call over my current slaves in the other courtyard to confront them and see. Oh, and in order for it to be fair, I suggest we have a public trial outside Nayland Manor's gate. If I really have slandered my elders, then it'll be good to let everyone criticize me together, isn't that so? The muscles on Madame Nayland's face twitched strangely, while her hands made cracking sounds as they clenched at her sides. Yet in the end she endured it, and with difficulty, she plastered a smile on her face. A public trial, you say? I love you dearly and regard you as my own daughter, how can I not believe that what you have said is true? Those slaves used my name to deliberately make things difficult for you, that group of damned slaves, indeed, a group of damned slaves. He continued, saying, Therefore, I've already punished them, yet it was without authority. Madame won't blame me, right? Madame Nayland's face showed a shocked expression, and when her eyes made contact with Wang Zhong's own, she saw him nod, then shake his head. Her gaze was somewhat filled with contempt as she looked at He and she couldn't help but coldly snort, calming down her heart. With an amiable smile once again hanging on her face, her voice gentle as she said, For just several insignificant slaves, how could I blame you? You've suffered hardships, in the future when you return to the Nayland family, I'll give you a tonic to nurse your body back to health. I've already ordered people to pack up your courtyard and you can rest assured, since Wet Nurse Chen loyally protected you, I will let her continue to serve you. What do you think? He nodded her head, slightly lowering her eyes as she replied, then I'll trouble Madam. Madame Nalen's eyes revealed a smile, and suddenly she waved her hand while raising her voice. Did all of you already bring the things I ordered you to prepare for third miss? Her voice barely fell, when several maids and servants entered the room walking in a row. Some carried chests, some carried teacups, while others still were holding trays, yet all of them were smiling as they walked in. Madame Nalen pointed at the chests and trays, saying, "These are clothes and jewelry I specially ordered people to prepare for you. In the future you will be a proper third miss of Nalen Manor, and as such, you will be representing Nalen Manor's face, so you can't be dressed so plainly again." The chests were opened and inside were luxurious dresses, while placed on the trays were fine pieces of jewelry. For a martial artist these items wouldn't have any usefulness, so they weren't worth more than a few crystal stones. But for the original Nalen Heshi, these ordinary clothes and pieces of jewelry were things she had never seen before. Madame Nalen noticed Heshi staring fixedly at the clothes and jewelry, and a satisfied expression showed on her face while a coldness flashed in her eyes. Reaching out, she picked up the teacup that was carried to her side, then handed over it to Heshi. "This tonic is something I ordered people to begin stewing since early this morning. It contains high-quality ginseng and snow lotus herb. It's useful for improving one's appearance and nourishing one's skin. Heshi, quickly drink it while it's still warm." Heshi took the tonic, and opening the lid, a strong fragrance immediately assaulted her nostrils. Once open, Heshi knew right away that a lot of high-quality ingredients were added, yet that definitely wasn't all. Chapter 112, Staging a Good Play. For example, the slightly sweet fragrance from red brocade mugwort, some sour myriad arrow grass, as well as pure sweetness from a cage core fruit, tsk. This may be more expensive compared to ordinary ginseng and snow lotus herb. Can Madame Nalen really be so eager to part with her hard-earned savings? However, with this tonic that she was given, it would result in Heshi losing her mind, gradually turning her into an idiot. Heshi smiled, and under Madame Nalen's burning gaze, she drained the tonic in the teacup in one gulp. "Good." Madame Nalen's face showed a satisfied smile, yet her eyes filled with scheming. "Later on, every day around this time, I will order the servants to deliver the tonic to you. Heshi, you must obediently drink it. Wait until after you've drunk it for 7 days, you will then become my puppet. At that time, I will let you experience living but not life, and dying yet not death." Living in Nalen Manor was naturally much more extravagant and relaxing compared to the other courtyard. Every day there were delicacies of all kinds to taste, satin and silk dresses, and beautiful servant girls catering to every whim. But wet nurse Chen's face was full of anxiety. After noticing Madame's personal servant, Si Lu, fixedly watch Heshi drink the tonic before leaving, she then lowered her voice and said, "Miss, why has Madame ordered a servant to deliver tonic to you every day? They also insist that you have to drink it all." A moment after leaving, Si Lu was no longer able to suppress the expression on her face, revealing a pleased smile. Heshi slightly sneered, "Wet nurse, rest assured, after today no one will deliver tonic again. Moreover, a good play will soon begin." Yet wet nurse Chen was not feeling reassured, her entire face instead creasing, and suddenly, she swung her hand, firmly slapping her own palm. "This is all the blame of this old fool for not being cautious and always telling Miss to return. Who would have imagined that the reason they let you come back is to force you to become the second Mrs. Scapegoat? Miss, I'm really sorry, even more, I've let Madame down." Heshi had no idea how to comfort her, and showing a disdainful smile said, with this small scheme she wants to push me into a pit of fire. Madame Nalen really underestimates me too much. Wet nurse, don't forget, I'm a person who has crawled back from the gates of hell." Heshi's words were not at all gentle and soft, but miraculously, they caused wet nurse Chen to settle down. Looking at the young Miss's indifferent expression, she felt that in just over a month young Miss had matured and grown stronger, becoming a master that everyone in the other courtyard relied on. If Madame's soul in heaven could see Miss like this, she would probably feel very happy. Just as He expected, after she drank the 7th cup of tonic, Madame Nayland thought she now had a foolproof plan and began to arrange for the Zhu family's father and son to visit once again. The Zhu family can be considered as a well-known and wealthy family in Jinling Kingdom. Zhu family's master, Zhu Yichun's madam, came from an outstanding and famous sect, while his younger sister, Zhu Raorao, married into the royal family and became an imperial concubine. Zhu Raorao gave birth to the 6th prince, and that prince is doted upon most by the emperor. Just going off family backgrounds, the Zhu family and the 4 great families can stand side by side. Unfortunately, the shrewd and powerful Master Zhu happens to have a stupid pig for a son. Not only was he weak, he was also ugly. Every day he would frequent brothels and kidnap women from lower-class families. He didn't yet have a main wife, but he already had 7 to 8 rooms full of concubines. With him resembling an ignorant and incompetent pig like this, which decent family's young miss would be willing to marry him? As it happened, only young women from small families would be interested, which Master Zhu despised. This had resulted in Zhu Zhongba's marriage been delayed. Chapter 113, How Could You Be Here? When Master Zhu learnt that Zhu Zhongba was beaten, he had become extremely furious. Yet when he knew it was Nayland Manor's second miss, Nayland Feishue, that had whipped and stripped his son's clothes, his anger immediately turned into happiness. Just the thought of it made him very happy. It didn't need to be said that the Nayland family's background is above that of the Zhu family, and that moreover, Nayland Feishue is famous in Jinling Kingdom as a genius martial artist. At such a young age she had already reached the early ranks of the foundation establishment stage, otherwise, the Ouyang family wouldn't have even considered marrying her to Ouyang Haoshuan. Master Zhu had already given up hope regarding the ability of Zhu Zhongba's cultivation base and his knowledge, but if he were to marry a talented wife from a family with a successful background, when a grandson is born, wouldn't he be the best choice as the Zhu family's heir? With this idea, the Zhu family wouldn't let go of this golden opportunity. They would take Nayland Feishue as a wife, even if it meant ruining her reputation. Originally the Nayland family had refused to yield, yet 2 days ago the Zhu family suddenly heard the news that they were welcome to visit and propose marriage. Master Zhu beamed with joy on the spot, and for the sake of insurance they even invited the 6th prince as a witness, then grandly headed towards Nayland Manor. Early in the morning, Madame Nayland ordered servants to clean up the main hall, and directed for people to invite He over. At this moment, He's complexion was still as shallow as before, but her tranquil and deep eyes from several days ago had now become dull and expressionless, while an occasional timid and fearful expression would flash across her face. A trace of happiness passed through Madame Nayland's heart. She had planned well and everything was all prepared. Today she'll definitely be able to settle the problem that's been pressuring her these last several days. However, when she saw the procession of people following Master Zhu, Madame Nayland's complexion suddenly became green and white. Among the group of people that came, apart from Master Zhu, Zhu Zhongba, and the 6th prince, unexpectedly, there was a handsome young man standing straight and tall. That young man's face was extremely familiar, so familiar to Madame Nayland that once she saw him her eyes opened wide and she uncontrollably exclaimed, "Ouyang Haoshuan, how can you be here?" That's right, the person who came is Ouyang Haoshuan. The same person who half a year ago was still reclining on a bed only half alive, the one whose marriage was withdrawn by the Nayland family, that Ouyang Haoshuan. Ouyang Haoshuan hadn't yet spoken, so the 6th prince stepped forward, smiling as he spoke. "Haoshuan is my friend, he fell ill and was confined to a bed. Now that he's finally completely recovered, I brought him with us to relieve his boredom." Madame Nayland will not take offense, right? How could this be? Madame Nayland's face was white as she yelled. Old Master said that no one was able to cure his illness. That he would be a useless person for a lifetime, so the words Madame Nayland spoke didn't bother Ouyang Haoshuan, but the expression of the 6th prince sank. He is currently fighting over the position of emperor and the assistance he receives from the Ouyang family is extremely important. Originally due to Ouyang Haoshuan's illness, the Ouyang family had no time to bother about who to back as emperor, while he is also not very good at gaining support. Now that Ouyang Haoshuan had finally recovered, coupled with the fact that their previous relationship was pretty good, he naturally grasped this opportunity. How can he tolerate other people slandering Ouyang Haoshuan? The sixth prince's gaze burned as he coldly stared at Madame Naylan. Does Madame Naylan realize what you've said? Haoshuan is this prince's friend. If you slander my friend again, this prince is obliged to have no other choice than to return and report this to royal father. Chapter 114, will not ignore the second miss. At this moment Ouyang Haoshuan finally stepped forward, and stopping the sixth prince, he slightly smiled. Sixth prince, don't get angry. Through the seriousness of my illness I was able to clearly see people's true faces. Due to misfortune my Ouyang family and myself are actually very lucky as I don't have to marry a snake-hearted wife. I ought to thank the Naylan family as I feel very grateful. Zhu Yichun standing on the side immediately laughed out loud while stroking his beard. My Zhu family aren't the tiniest bit afraid of taking a snake-hearted woman as a wife. The woman will become one of our Zhu family's people, and for a pungent and vicious daughter-in-law, our Zhu family has plenty of methods to teach her. It won't even take us a year to make her obedient, turning her into my son's good wife. In this regard, Madame Naylan doesn't need to be worried. Our Zhu family will definitely not ignore the second Mississippi. The muscles on Madame Naylan's face continuously twitched while it flushed due to shame. To prevent herself from releasing a sharp and vulgar curse, her hands hanging at her sides were clenched so tightly the veins showed. Seeing Ouyang Haoshuan's handsome face, with his body naturally emitting an elegant imposing manner, it was a very sharp contrast compared to Zhu Zhongba who resembled a pig. Madame Naylan regretted until her intestines were green. She didn't think that Ouyang Haoshuan would ever be able to recover. Old Master had diagnosed that he would be permanently crippled, so in the end, who was it that cured him? If she had known earlier that it was going to be like this, marrying Fei Xue into the Ouyang family is absolutely the better choice. But now, everything is ruined. Madame Naylan grit her teeth in regret until a cracking noise could be heard, but Zhu Yichun didn't care about her expression as his small, bright and shiny eyes stared fixedly at Madame Naylan. Madame Naylan, today we have come to propose marriage. After all, the second miss and my son already have an intimate physical relationship, so if my son doesn't marry her, then isn't the reputation of the second miss forever ruined? I say it's better for Madame to call the second miss out. Letting the two young people meet each other will be good, and it'll be best if we set the marriage date today. Madame Naylan heard the three words, intimate physical relationship, and the veins on her forehead bulged. Her gaze swept over Ouyang Haoshuan's almost mocking smile and her heart felt anxious, yet she still ordered a servant to bring Heshi out. After a moment, a girl wearing a pink gauze skirt covered with a transparent light muslin, with her hair rolled into two buns on the top of head, walked out supported by a servant on either arm. Once Zhu Zhongba saw that girl, bewilderment flashed in his eyes as they opened widely in shock. Zhu Zhongba suddenly rushed forth in anger while opening his big mouth to curse. The girl slightly lifted her head from its previously lowered position and revealed a sinister smile towards him. Zhu Zhongba, having learned his lesson once, immediately halted and felt a burst of pain all over, his voice stuck in his throat. The next second, he saw the girl flip her palm over, flashing the slave card in her hand towards him. He then felt a stabbing pain in his brain, and following that, his consciousness began to fade with only a command echoing in his mind, leaving him no other choice but to comply. Out of the people present, none of them noticed Heshi's small action except Ouyang Haoshuan. Standing to the side he glanced at her and Zhu Zhongba yet didn't say anything, a smile visible in the depth of his eyes. Madame Naylan grabbed Heshi's hand and pulled her towards the Zhu father and son. On that day, the one that had a physical relationship and conflict with young master Zhu Zhongba was this child. She's also a young miss of our Naylan manor. In regards to a connection by marriage between your Zhu family and my Naylan family, our families are well matched in terms of social status, so this can be considered an appropriate match. Chapter 115, achieving a good marriage. Madame Nalan's words hadn't yet finished, when Zhu Zhongba, under the control of Heshi, started jumping and shouting, "It's not her. Dad, it's not this ugly person. Does Nalan Manor take me as a fool to play with? An ugly, useless, and saltless woman like this, how could this young master even look at her? Moreover, Nalan Feishue is known as a shrewish vixen, yet look this timid and weak person, how is she the same as Nalan Feishue?" Zhu Yichun's complexion sank in a split second, and coldly directed at Madame Nalan, "Madame Nalan, what is the meaning of this? Taking an unknown female servant and getting her to act as a substitute, do you think my Zhu family is fun to mess with? With that being the case, don't blame me for becoming hostile. Your Highness Sixth Prince, when we return I must meet with Gue Fei, 1, to inform her about Nalan Manor taking advantage of their position to bully my Zhu family. We'll see if your Nalan family's daughter will still be able to be married off in the future or not." Sixth Prince smiled and nodded, his expression was of one watching a good play. Madame Nalan became anxious, quickly saying, "This is Heshi, our Nalan Manor's third miss, definitely not an unknown female servant. If Master Zhu does not believe me, you can go to the city to check the household register. You'll then be able to see whether or not Nalan Manor has a third miss called Nalan Heshi." Pausing, Madame Nalan slowly released a sigh, her face showing remorse and grief. "This is also my fault for not strictly teaching my daughter. A few days ago we learnt that because Fei Xue was absent from Nalan Manor, with a heart full of grievance, she unexpectedly pretended to be Fei Xue and prostituted herself in Gluttonous House, hoping to find her ideal husband. We and Fei Xue were unaware of this matter until a few days ago when Heshi's personal servant revealed everything. Only then did we know that she and young Master Zhu already had a close physical relationship. Although this is unreasonable, it can be considered that the Zhu family and our Nalan family were predestined to have a relationship. To be able to achieve a good marriage by fate would be beneficial for both of our families, right?" Heshi felt like applauding when she heard Madame Nalan's words, because as to the truth of this matter, she had guessed about a lot of it. Moreover, these words also hinted to Zhu Yichun that if the Zhu family wanted to form a connection by marriage with the Nalan family, they would have to accept Heshi. In the first place, with the Nalan family's background and Nalan Zheng's medical expertise, the benefit of a marriage between the two families would be great, while neither parties would suffer a loss. So why would he be confused about which young miss of the Nalan family his son should marry? Zhu Yichun showed a contemplative expression on his face. Was he beginning to consider this proposal? However, will Heshi let Madame Nalan succeed? Of course not. Suddenly, they heard Zhu Zhongba once again shout, "Nalan Heshi. Isn't that the famous trash of the Nalan family, without a cultivation base and an ugly appearance? If I married her, who knows what sort of son would be born, wouldn't he be useless trash? Dad, I don't want to marry her. You see her cowardly and useless appearance, how could she have managed to beat me up into a pig? No matter what, my cultivation base is still rank 9 of the Qi refining stage, so how could I be beaten all over by this woman who doesn't have even the littlest bit of spiritual power? If this were to be spread in the future, how would I conduct myself? Dad, Nalan Manor simply want to substitute in shoddy goods, making fun of us, so Dad, you absolutely cannot agree to them." Zhu Yichun's expression sunk in a flash. Although his son's words were unpleasant to hear, they are still true. Noticing the young girl's lowered head and her dim-witted appearance, one look was all it took for him to know that she wasn't favored in the Nalan family. Even if his son were to marry her, how much assistance would the Zhu family actually be able to obtain? It's simply a child thrown out by the Nalan family. 1. Gue Fei means senior concubine, here it's referring to the sixth prince's mother, Zhu Yichun's younger sister, Zhu Raorao, who married the emperor. Chapter 116, Nalan Jingzi. Thinking of this, the expression in Zhu Yichun's eyes became gloomy and cold, and with a stern voice he said, "Where's Nalan Jingzi? I want to ask him if he still wants his reputation as the #1 doctor of Jinling Kingdom." Unexpectedly he condones his wife and child's behavior of fooling and deceiving my Zhu family. I came today to propose marriage and give your Nalan Manor face in accepting Nalan Feishua as a member of my Zhu family, yet if we were following tradition and only bringing a small sedan to receive her as a concubine, no one would dare say anything. You dare. Madame Nalan screamed, no longer able to tolerable his words. You should take a look at what kind of a person your Zhu family's son is. He's now almost 30 years old and hasn't even reached the foundation establishment stage, whereas my daughter is a Peerlese talented who is only 18 years old and has already reached the foundation establishment stage. Your son wishing to marry my Feishua is like a toad wanting to eat swan meat, don't even think about it. I'll warn you now, either you set the marriage between your Zhu family and Nalan Heshi today, or you can get lost. Do you think that Nalan Manor is afraid of your Zhu family? She will absolutely not allow her baby daughter to marry this kind of idiot, especially in front of Ouyang Haoshuan. Madame Nalan's threat made the complexion of the Zhu family father and son, as well as that of the sixth prince, become extremely ugly. Madame Nalan even resorted to shoving Heshi herself, roaring, quickly speak, say that you admire young Master Zhu and want to marry him as a main wife. A few days ago, wasn't it you who told me that you fell in love at first sight with young Master Zhu at Gluttonous House, so therefore you followed him to Zhu Manor? After Heshi was pushed she staggered a bit, and with her legs soft, she simply sat down on the chair beside her. Since the beginning her head had been hanging low, her body shivering, while a timid and pitiful expression was frozen on her face. With the look of one being bullied, her mouth kept saying, I, as if she was unable to say a complete sentence, making Zhu Yichun believe more than ever that she was being forced. Only Ouyang Haoshuan had slowly seen the clues of what was happening, but for him to be able to see the Nalan family and Nalan Feishua have bad luck, of course he wouldn't expose it. Instead, he added fuel to the fire. He laughed lightly, and as if he was gossiping to the sixth prince said, I'm still unsure of when Madame Nalan become Nalan Manor's master. At the time they withdrew marriage it was like this, and now with the Zhu family, it's exactly the same situation. Dr. Nalan never actually shows his face by being present so people who know him will say that Dr. Nalan is busy, but people who don't know him will think that Dr. Nalan is a weak and incompetent man, relying on his wife and child to act as the bad people. The sixth prince laughed when he heard this and was about to reply when a servant suddenly started calling in a panic from outside the door, Master, you've come? Madame Nalan's complexion changed while panic and fright swirled in her eyes one after another, and suddenly grabbing Heshi's clothes, she abruptly started twisting the fabric. All this time Nalan Zhengze had actually been in the manor, but he was in his basement researching medicine. Regarding the matter of Nalan Feishua, Madame Nalan had mentioned it to him yet he had been unwilling to respond. So Madame Nalan had no choice but to think of a way to restore her daughter's and Nalan Manor's reputation by herself. In fact, there is no way that it was possible for Heshi to be a substitute as Nalan Zhengze had already ordered earlier, that without his permission, no one was allowed to use Heshi. If he knew of what she was doing now. Thinking of her cold and fickle husband, Madame Nalan's body couldn't help but tremble. Chapter 117, Slapping her face from his outward appearance, Nalan Zhengze is a tall and handsome man. With a short mustache above his upper lip, a long fluttering beard and fair skin, his countenance was that of a refined sage. Yet the first time Heshi saw this person she felt a chill spread throughout her heart, especially when those fathomless eyes swept over her. It was like being stared at by a poisonous snake, the muscles in her body couldn't help but become taut. This cheap father, really wasn't a simple guy. Looking at Heshi he noticed her head hanging low with a shivering and timid appearance, her face shallow and pale, and that she was still without spiritual power. Nothing was different from the last time he saw her. So Nalan Zhengze quickly shifted his line of sight, yet when his gaze fell on Ouyang Haoshuan, his eyes suddenly narrowed. His body stiffened for a long time before he then stepped forward, slightly nodding his head. Young Master Ouyang, previously this old man learnt that his skills weren't good enough as I was unable to find a method to heal you. I don't know which genius doctor with magical hands and a miracle cure was able to fix your fractured meridians. When speaking, Nailin expression was completely tranquil, while on the contrary, his eyes burned hate, unwillingness to accept his failure blazing fiercely. Ever since a rumor had spread in the streets about a young genius doctor being able to heal fractured meridians, he had continuously dispatched his people to secretly find him. As long as he managed to find that person and dig out his secrets, then he, Nailin, would be able to become a genuine genius doctor. He would even be able to join the upper ranks of the Doctors' Association. However, all of his people had been searching for more than half a month with no results, yet the Ouyang family had managed to find him. For this genius doctor to cure Ouyang Haoshuan that he, Nailin, had diagnosed as certainly going to die, it is simply slapping his face. Ouyang Haoshuan calmly looked at Nailin, laughing lightly as he said, "There's no need for Dr. Nailin to be modest, your medical expertise is excellent. Compared to the other doctors, you concluded the earliest that I couldn't be cured, even neatly withdrawing the marriage agreement between your Nailin family and my Ouyang family. This judgment and decision-making ability, how can it at all compare to an insignificant genius doctor?" His words were full of mockery and ridicule, causing the Nailin family's complexion to turn green and white. The sixth prince even laughed out loud, from time to time even offering his own words of praise, but those words of praise were more like sarcasm. Rage flashed across Nailin face before he quickly recovered, and turning his head, he faced Zhu Yichun. "I was unaware that Master Zhu had paid a visit and was unable to welcome you, I'm very sorry." Zhu Yichun was roared at by Madame Nailin just a moment ago, so with his displeasure still written across his face, he coldly said, "Dr. Nailin doesn't have to speak so politely, today I'm only here for an answer. Your daughter Nailin Feishue and my son Zhu Zhongba have an intimate physical relationship, my son was even whipped by her. Nailin Feishue belongs to us of the Zhu family. Today I ask the sixth prince to be a witness as we propose marriage and to give your Nailin family face, yet who would have thought that your good wife would unexpectedly bring out a useless concubine's daughter instead? Using this third miss to fool us and wanting to make her act as a substitute, is this you wanting to step on my Zhu family's face?" The more Nailin heard, the uglier his face became. After hearing everything he suddenly turned around, and swinging his hand, he ruthlessly slapped his palm on Madame Nailin's face. Madame Nailin was completely caught off guard, her body falling to the ground with a thump. Clutching her red and swollen cheek with one hand, her eyes showed her shock and fear, her voice shaking, "My lord, you, how can you hit me?" Chapter 118, Foolish woman. Nailin eyes were ruthless as they swept over her and he spoke only one sentence, "I'll settle this with you later." Then looking at Zhu Yichun again, with his face set in one of apology, he said, "My wife has behaved outrageously, acting like Master Zhu and the sixth prince are a joke. Regarding Feishue's matter, I've already investigated it, and since the Zhu family has Feishue's personal token, then it can be seen that the Nailin family and the Zhu family have a relationship. Since that's the case, for the two people involved to be able to form a connection, Feishue is honored. We hope that in the future after Feishue is married, that the Zhu family will be able to treat her well." Of course. Zhu Yichun, seeing that he had achieved his purpose, immediately beamed with joy. "Once second miss is married, she'll be one of my Zhu family's people, so as long she abides by how a woman is supposed to act, we of the Zhu family will naturally treat her well. Then since the marriage of our two families is decided, I also brought an invitation card for Zhongba's birthday celebration. I thought that it would be better to set the marriage for the same time." "My lord, you're crazy. How can Feishue marry this?" Madame Nailin's scream was immediately silenced under Nailin cold and sharp glare. As she clutched her cheek due to the numbing pain spreading throughout her face, thinking of her daughter's ruined future, her grief rose from within and caused her to quietly weep. She squatted next to Madame Nailin and looked as if she wanted to help support her up, yet instead, she lightly wiped a colorless and odorless medicinal powder on Madame Nailin's wound. Madame Nailin fiercely shoved her away and cursed in a sharp voice, "Slut! It's you who caused trouble for my Feishue. Get lost, dash. Just get lost, dash." She took advantage of the shove to tumble on the ground, and curling her body up, she started shivering. Naelanjungza glanced at her, still despising that cowardly and incompetent appearance, yet in the bottom of his heart he felt that something was fishy. But Naelanjungza had no time to think more about it as Zhu Yichun was urging him to hurry up. So he quickly led the few men in the room to his study to exchange invitation cards, and also set a date for Zhu Zhongba and Naelan Feishua's marriage. Although he was somewhat reluctant to part with Naelan Feishua, as she is after all a daughter he had raised at his knee, compared to the welfare of Naelan Manor, there is nothing that couldn't be sacrificed. Madame Naelan saw them leave to settle matters and all she could do was weep endlessly. Before leaving to follow them she instructed for Wang Zhong to send Heshi back to the other courtyard, and with a strict look, she declared that Heshi was never allowed to return to Naelan Manor again. As she watched the backs of the people leaving, Heshi finally raised her head with a smirk upon her face. Madame Naelan, didn't you give me medicine for 7 days hoping that I would become an idiot? In that case, not reciprocating would be rude. I'll respond in kind by letting you suffer from advanced symptoms of Alzheimer's disease. You better hope that my cheap father is truly a genius doctor, otherwise, you'll be a deranged senile woman for the rest of your life. Late at night in the courtyard by Tsang Mountain, stars are twinkling and the moonlight is perfect. Heshi was sitting alone on the roof of the highest building in the courtyard, lightly frowning as she gazed towards the vast sky full of stars. Tomorrow is the agreed-upon day that Nan Gongyu promised to lift the seal on her dantian, but that guy had disappeared for several days already, while these last 2 days Bai Hu had also not come. Before her eyes a man's handsome face slowly emerged, with a demonic and pampering smile, and that hot breath and a hug she couldn't oppose. Heshi's face reddened and she secretly scolded, "Bastard," but her originally jittery heart had gradually settled down. Nan Gongyu was mostly overbearing, leaving her little room to resist, but this man was serious when he made that promise, making her unconsciously want to believe him. Without any reason at all, she just believed that he wouldn't deceive her. Heshi was lost in thought when suddenly, she shivered from a coldness that froze her body, causing her to become alert and abruptly sit up. Chapter 119, Still useless trash. Within her range of spiritual perception she could clearly sense several strong auras rapidly approaching her direction. The auras surrounding these people were unfamiliar and hidden, indicating that whatever they wanted, it obviously wasn't anything good. Heshi's brows slightly wrinkled, and quickly concealing her aura, she leapt onto the roof of her own room to hide, yet still be able to monitor everything that occurred in her courtyard. Almost at the same time, 4 tall men with their bodies wrapped in black clothes quietly broke into the small courtyard. With Heshi currently lacking the slightest amount of spiritual power, she of course had no way to know what rank their cultivation bases were. But judging from the strong power pressure being emitted from their bodies, they weren't low-level martial artists. Amongst these 4 people, the man with the tallest stature waved his hand, sending the 3 other figures to quietly leap to every corner of the small courtyard. While the tallest masked man moved directly towards her bedroom. Heshi's heart shivered, and moving from her position, she rapidly entered the room from the rear window. It seemed that this group of people were rushing here for her because looking at their actions and attitude, they were making an utmost effort to not alarm the people in this courtyard. Since they were sneaking around, their purpose wouldn't be to kill anyone, but some other hidden motive. Since they only dared to secretly nose around, then she better beat them at their own game and see what they wanted. Moreover, this group of people's manner is suspicious. Their cultivation bases are much higher than hers, so if she was to collide with them, Heshi wasn't afraid for herself, but the people in this courtyard would most likely suffer. Once deciding on a plan, Heshi quickly lay down on the bed and closed her eyes to pretend to sleep. In order to not reveal any flaws, her consciousness entered her space, and from her space she observed the situation outside. After a moment, her bedroom door that was locked quietly opened, and a tall shadow quietly entered. The light from the moon and stars lit up the doorway, illuminating the black-clothed man's body. Heshi was holding her breath in anticipation, yet once she saw this, she frowned. Why did she feel that the black-clothed man's figure was somewhat familiar, as if she had seen it somewhere before? The man dressed in black walked to the front of bed, and seeing Heshi deeply asleep, a touch of suspicion flashed in his eyes as he examined her. He looked at the small shallow face for a long time, then suddenly he lifted his hand and placed it on Heshi's chest. Heshi startled in fright, thinking that he was going to kill her. Yet within the next moment, she felt a trace of icy cold spiritual power enter her body through the palm on her chest. It searched along her four limbs and hundreds of bones towards her dantian, finally gathering in her brain. Heshi suddenly opened her eyes wide in her space, soul-searching technique. This black-clothed man is actually using the soul-searching technique on her. This is a technique that only a high-level cultivator was able to use against a low-level cultivator. Not only would they be able to dig out a person's memory, but if the person this technique was used against struggled and resisted, it would ultimately result in them becoming an idiot. In the end, who is this person that was so ruthless they used the soul-searching technique on Nalan Heshi? What is his purpose? Heshi rejoiced that fortunately her mind is hiding in her space, so even if this black-clothed man searched through every memory in her brain, he would only be able to sense her sleeping and nothing else. Sure enough, after the time it would take to burn half an incense stick, the black-clothed man began to exude a ruthless and irritated aura. There's nothing. Unexpectedly there wasn't any useful information. As well as being unable to cultivate spiritual power in her dantian, this girl sleeping on the bed was clearly still useless trash. Chapter 120, Nalan Heshi's Mother. Just then, the other black-clothed men that had been searching the small courtyard rushed in, conveying their results to the man standing over Heshi. This place is a spiritual energy wasteland, so even though they searched such a big courtyard, they couldn't find even one spiritual plant or a piece of crystal stone, let alone something like a jade slip. The black-clothed man glared fiercely at the sleeping soundly Heshi, and suddenly raising his hand, he reached down to strangle her. Heshi was scared as she watched from her space. At this moment, she clearly sensed the man's killing intent. He exuded loathing and detest, as if he was itching to dismember her body into pieces. All of Heshi's soft hair was standing on end as she resisted the almost unbearable urge to exit her space. Yet just as she was about to move, she heard the man suddenly start to talk with a low, hoarse voice. "I didn't expect that from the stunning you, all that would remain of your bloodline is actually trash destined to be bullied like this. If at that time you had obeyed me, as things have reached this stage, I wonder if you regret your decision." Finished speaking he withdrew his hand, and shouting a low, "Withdraw," he then left the room. Once Heshi was certain that all the intruders had left, her consciousness exited her space and returned to her body. Touching her neck that still felt chilled, a trace of doubt emerged in her heart. What was the meaning of the last sentence that man had spoken? This stunning person, is that the mother of Nalan Heshi? However, Nalan Heshi's mother was obviously Nalan Jing's concubine. If she had really been peerless, how could she have been willing to be someone's concubine? Previously she had thought that Nalan Heshi is a daughter of an unfavored concubine from Nalan Manor. Petty and low, cowardly, and without the slightest innate talent for cultivating, even the most lowly servant hadn't paid attention to her. Yet now it seems that Nalan Heshi's identity is apparently not so simple. Heshi was puzzled as she got up to examine every corner of her small courtyard. The actions of these men were very careful. Although they had randomly dug 3 feet holes around the yard, the items arranged in the house hadn't been disturbed much, and everyone was still sleeping soundly. In the end, what was that group of black-clothed people looking for? At this moment, that group of black-clothed people that Heshi was wondering about were rapidly sneaking into Yanjing City, jumping between the high building walls. Several breaths later, they arrived in front of a huge residence of a high-ranking official. The leader of the black-clothed men took off his mask, and ripping off the black clothes, he strutted through the half-open side door. The remaining 3 men quietly hid, not entering the courtyard. Above this residence's gate hung an impressive and imposing plaque with 2 words, Nalan Manor. The leader of the black-clothed men is Yanjing City's most outstanding, famous, and #1 doctor, Nalan Jingza. Nailanjung's face was overcast as he walked into his study, and after confirming that no one was nearby, he quickly stepped in front of a redwood shelf, using one hand to rotate an ordinary-looking vase left and right a few times. The next moment the redwood shelf issued caw-caw sounds, and shifting to the left and the right, it revealed an empty room. A simple pill furnace and some refining tools were set up, while on the left there was a spiral staircase leading down. In front of the pill furnace, there hung a picture of a beautiful woman. Nailanjungza slowly stepped forward, staring at the picture without blinking as he walked. On the slightly yellowed paper a beautiful woman that could make a person have to pause and catch their breath vividly appeared. With long shapely eyebrows and phoenix eyes, a beautiful nose and snow-white skin, her cold and indifferent expression made her look like a goddess from the ninth heaven. Such a lofty woman would of course not bother with ordinary people. Chapter 121, Black-Clothed Man. If Heshi were here now, she would have been shocked to find that the woman in this picture is a 7 out of 10 in similarity with her transformed appearance. Lingyue, Lingyue, Nailanjungza repeated the woman's name over and over again. With an intoxicated expression on his face, he kissed the lips of the woman in the picture and murmured, Lingyue, do you know how much I miss you? He had barely spoken when suddenly, an hysterical-like light shone in his eyes born from insanity and hate. Retreating back a step, he roared, you're just my concubine, but why do you look down on me, why don't you obey me? At this moment, a crackling sound could be heard coming from below the spiral staircase. Following that, a beast-like roar with banging and scratching sounds echoed. Nailanjung's lips raised in a smirk, and laughing twice, he looked at the stunning woman in the picture, his face twisted with an evil smile, and Lingyue. Aren't you so proud and strong? But did you ever think that the child you would give birth to would fall into my hands for me to take advantage of? Ha 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 ha, because of the intrusion of the black-clothed men, Heshi didn't go to sleep, rather, she meditated in her space. She discovered that although she is unable to store spiritual power and advance cultivation bases, with the spiritual energy entering her body repeatedly, it cleansed her meridians. So whether it is in strength or speed, she has the qualifications to advance. Regarding internal power and martial arts, she is now one rank higher than she was in her previous life. As for the skill to conceal herself, she's already at a much higher rank than the low-level martial artists in this world. While cultivating, time passed slowly, and soon, the pitch-black night sky outside her space slowly lightened, and streaks of golden light colored the eastern sky. Heshi lazily stretched her body, and just as she was about to exit her space, a sudden chill flashed through her body, leaving her slightly numb. It was like there were countless insects crawling along her spine, causing every nerve in her body to become taut. The black-clothed men, it's those black-clothed men again. Moreover, there's still 4 of them. However, the difference between the group from last night and the group now, is that this group of black-clothed men have a frightening manner about them. They weren't concealing the sharp killing intentions they exuded. Even if these people were still far away, Heshi was able to smell the strong reek of blood their bodies carried. No one was more familiar than Heshi about what those kind of people were like. Those kind of people were without the slightest scruple, becoming joyful at the thought of slaughter. Her complexion changed, and quickly getting up, she ordered Shi Jia and the others to flee with Wet Nurse Chen and Xiao Li into Tsang Mountain. Wet Nurse Chen was reluctant to escape and leave Heshi alone, but she was efficiently knocked out by Heshi, who then threw her to Shi Jia, properly protect Wet Nurse Chen and Xiao Li. Without my order, no one is allowed to return. Shi Jia and the others hesitated as they worriedly looked at Heshi, but their instinct to obey made them grit their teeth and nod. Tears clung to Xiao Li's face, and choking back sobs she said, Miss, have I brought trouble to you? I'm not leaving, I want to stay with you. Heshi sneered, do you want me to knock you out too? No matter who the people are that come, I have a way to deal with them. I don't need you all to worry about it. Pausing, she then continued and said, keep watch over our home for me. Chapter 122, Powerless Ant. Right, our home, although it has only been a short time period of little more than a month, she has regarded this courtyard as home, the people in this courtyard as her family. She will not allow her family to meet with mishap. For any person who dares to touch those she cares about, she will definitely let them pay a painful price. Xiao Li's face gradually showed a firm look of dedication, and wiping her tears, she repeatedly nodded her head. Her expression of one making a promise. Shi Jia, Xiao Li, and the others had just left, when several black-clothed men using flying swords rapidly descended on the empty ground of the small courtyard. They of course saw that weak old woman and child running to hide in Song Mountain, so one person amongst them who was fiddling with a dagger in his hand sneeringly asked, "Do I need to rush over and get rid of those useless people?" Another person replied with, "Our boss's order was that the patron only wanted Nalan Heshi's life, we don't have any business with the rest." Did he think our drought demon organization, full of gold medal assassins, was a vegetable market? That when we receive a mission we also include a service of giving a gift? The two other people burst into loud laughter, their gazes landing on one of the small houses in the courtyard. The person who was previously talking slightly raised an eyebrow as he said, "I really didn't expect that the third miss, the legendary trash of Nalan Manor, would have such courage. Letting her servants leave first and staying behind to throw her life away, tisk tsk, so interesting." Another young voice couldn't help but grumble, "I don't know what our boss was thinking. She's only trash without a cultivation base, that's all, she hasn't even reached the chi refining stage. Is it necessary to use all four of us together to dispose of her? Alright, our boss decided it like this, so naturally he has reason. As long as we obediently obey his orders then that will be enough. Xiao Ba, you go, efficiently bring the young Mrs. Severed Head out here, we'll wait for you." If people knew that we, four Grand Meridian stage martial artists, killed an ordinary person together, wouldn't we be a laughing stock? Xiao Ba, the youngest martial artist muttered as he obediently pushed the door open and walked to where Heshi's room was located. The three other assassins remained in the small courtyard, leisurely chatting. They were completely unworried about whether Xiao Ba would be able to kill that girl or not. After all, one is a Meridian stage martial artist, while the other one is an ordinary person without a cultivation base. It was like a human and an ant, if stepped on, the ant would die, so how could be afraid of a powerless ant? Xiao Ba flipped the dagger in his hand, and without even bothering to conceal his figure, he entered the plainly decorated woman's bedroom with loud footsteps. Yet the next moment, Xiao Ba suddenly sensed the coldness of a hidden weapon directly shoot towards him. Not good. Xiao Ba thought gloomily, and moving sideways, he dodged countless hidden weapons that swept over his cheek, but some still directly pierced his body. As the hidden weapons reached his body, Xiao Ba discovered that they were silver needles, as thin as a strand of hair. When these needles touched his body, he found that they contained an icy spiritual power that made him, this Meridian stage martial artist's entire body grow cold. However, Xiao Ba simply didn't care about these small lousy needles with weak icy spiritual power. With this attack though, it did arouse the bloodlust within his body. "Little girl, if you had just obediently died, I could have made it fast and painless. But since you want to resist, then you can taste my 18 cruel methods." Saying so, he gathered all his spiritual power, then rushed towards the girl hidden in the shadows. But soon, Xiao Ba's expression changed to one of alarm. He was shocked to find that his dantian was being sealed by something. So he was unable to move the spiritual power in his body. Chapter 123, Beheaded in One Strike, You. Xiao Ba opened his mouth to shout, but the little girl that had been hiding in the shadows suddenly disappeared. The next moment, Xiao Ba felt a burst of sharp pain in his throat, and suddenly, blood was spewing from his neck. Opening his eyes wide in disbelief, he stared at the girl almost within reach before he quickly retreated. His eyes were filled with fright, unwillingness, and despair. Soon after he slowly closed his eyes, his breathing ceasing. Beheaded in one strike. He didn't pause, and quickly transferring all the internal power within her body to conceal her figure, she turned around and jumped out the window, escaping towards the depths of Tsang Mountain. In fact, He's current strength could in no way compare to a group of assassins, let alone 3. She hadn't even had the confidence that she would win a one-on-one fight. Just a moment ago, if that assassin hadn't been so careless, or if he hadn't tried to use so much spiritual power after being hit by the invisible needles, he would have discovered that it was just a thin layer of internal power sealing his dantian. It wouldn't have been able to withstand even a single blow. Unfortunately, his first mistake was to seriously underestimate He, and then, his second mistake was to lose his composure and become frightened by the invisible needles, becoming so terrified he had lost his ability to think. It was only then that He had found the opportunity to kill him in one hit. In the yard, the remaining 3 assassins were still leisurely chatting, and even though they smelled the strong reek of blood, they didn't have the slightest worry. But as time went by, they started to realize that Xiao Ba was taking a little too long to complete his task, and that there weren't any sounds of movement coming from the room. Puzzled, they walked to the room, and after barely opening the door, all 3 of the assassins' faces changed. They saw that the small room was covered in blood, it even flowed to the door while the stench of it permeated the room. Lying in the middle of a pool of blood was their younger brother, Xiao Ba. His eyes were wide open, his face frightened, and his breathing had long since ceased. The leader looked at his younger brother's corpse and his eyes bulged in anger. Grinding his teeth, he ruthlessly said, "Chase her. We must tear that smelly girl's body to shreds." The 3 assassins were extremely fast, so although He had a head start and was using her qin gong, when facing martial artists using flying swords, she was still caught in the blink of an eye. The leader of the assassins halted in mid-air, and looking below at the lightning speed of He, the corner of his mouth raised to reveal the trace of a cruel smile. To an ordinary person's eyes, He's speed is extremely fast, nearly turning her into a shadow, but for 3 Meridian stage experts, this kind of speed is simply not worth mentioning. The leader raised his arm, and condensing his spiritual power into a dark red fire ball on his hand, he wrapped it around the flying sword. Then, with one hand holding the sword hilt, he suddenly threw the sword. The fireball engulfed the flying sword in a flash, following it as it hurtled at lightning speed towards the fleeing He. The assassins heard a loud bang, and the fireball scattered, turning the flying sword into fine powder. Yet the expected outcome of He being torn apart into hundreds of pieces didn't occur. She instead stumbled 2 steps due to the heat of the explosion, yet without pausing she continued to dash forward, as if she wasn't affected by that attack in the slightest. In mid-air, the 3 assassins' faces showed their shock. One must know that the strike from the lead assassin a moment ago was equal to the strength of 10 people. His cultivation base is currently at the peak of Meridian stage, so even an expert on Gold Core stage would at least suffer a little damage from that strike. Yet how is that an ordinary person was able to walk away, seemingly unharmed? Chapter 124, Piercing the Heart. So thinking about it, there is only one explanation: this girl's body possessed a treasure. Moreover, it must be a rank 5 or higher magical tool. The assassins looked at each other in dismay, greed evident in their expressions as they suddenly accelerated the speed of their flying swords to catch up to He. While He was fleeing, she touched her hair, and when she felt the remnants of a fine powder in her hand, her heart soared. Just a moment ago, it wasn't any sort of treasure that had blocked the assassin's attack, rather, it was the imprint that Nan Gongyu left on her body. It was only at a time when her life was at risk that the imprint would transform into a protective barrier, keeping her safe from harm. Nan Gongyu, seems like I already owe him too much. Unfortunately though, it seems that today might be her funeral. She was afraid that perhaps she wouldn't have the opportunity to repay him in the future. This thought had just flashed through He's mind, when before her eyes those assassins suddenly surrounded her. The leader's gaze was filled with fake kindness as he looked at her, yet he coldly said, "Nalan He, if you hand over the treasure hidden on your body, I'll make your death less painful, otherwise, based on the hatred we have for you after you killed Xiao Ba, we will certainly have you begging for death before we're through. He slightly panted, her gaze cold as she studied the three people before her without the slightest trace of panic or fear. Who ordered you to kill me? Standing on the left side of the leader, one of the assassin's expressions abruptly twisted, and pulling out his long sword he shouted, "Smelly girl," still unwilling to shed tears without seeing a coffin. "You even dare to adopt a high attitude with us when it's just you alone. Do you think you're a match for us?" Heshi's figure suddenly flashed as she disappeared from where she was originally standing, and with lightning speed due to her internal power, she rushed towards the assassin on the left. The assassin's face slightly changed, and condensing a thunderbolt on his palm, he fiercely threw it towards Heshi's chest. A crack could be heard, and Heshi felt a sharp scorching pain, causing all four of her limbs to spasm. But she didn't retreat, instead, she continued forward. After being struck by the thunderbolt, her face showed a strange smile as she rushed towards him. The assassin on the left suddenly uttered an exclamation, and slowly bowed his head. Looking down, he saw a slender dagger accurately stabbed into his abdomen, blood steadily seeping from the wound. Yet the frightening part is that when the blood made contact with the air, it suddenly turned a dark green color that could cause a person's hair to stand on end. Pain, itchy. The assassin dropped his long sword and frantically scratched his body as he rolled around on the ground wailing. In the blink of an eye, his face was now badly mangled and dripping blood. Xiao Wu. What happening to you? The assassin on the right wanted to rush over and help him, but was stopped by the leader, Lao San. Look clearly. Xiao Wu is highly poisonous right now, you will only suffer too if you go over to him. Saying so, his ruthless gaze fiercely stabbed towards Heshi like a sharp sword. Slut, what have you done to Xiao Wu? The side of Heshi's body was badly mangled and bleeding from being struck by the thunderbolt, and due to the pain, her complexion was deathly pale. Yet upon her mouth was an unscrupulous smile as she said, I placed a poison named tearing heart-splitting lung on the dagger I used. As soon as the poison enters the heart and arteries, the whole body will become unbearably painful and itchy. He only needs to shred his heart to stop the pain. As if confirming Heshi's words, that assassin called Xiao Wu all of a sudden released a long mournful hiss, hysterically howling, I can't stand it anymore. Following that, his body suddenly exploded, flesh and blood splattering everywhere. Chapter 125, Unwilling. The leader's forehead twitched as he looked at the flesh and blood that landed on his foot, thinking that there were a few pieces of shredded heart mixed in the gore. The other remaining assassin's eyes were full of alarm and resentment as he looked at Heshi. They didn't expect that although throughout the year they would be the ones attacking, suddenly, they were the ones being attacked. An insignificant ordinary person without a cultivation base had actually dared to mess with them, forcing the four expert Meridian stage martial artists into a tight corner. Not just Xiao Ba had lost his life, now Xiao Wu had died miserably too. From this moment on, these two drought demon assassins' expressions were grave. They no longer dared to regard Heshi as an ordinary and weak woman. But from the bottom of Heshi's heart a powerless and bitter laugh rose. In fact, her poisons were very difficult to deal with, but a martial artist's defense power is more difficult to deal with. Just recently with Xiao Wu, if she hadn't done the unexpected and risked her life by not avoiding the thunderbolt, then there would have been no way she could have caught him off guard and managed to insert the poisonous dagger into his dantian. If she had missed, the poison would have been unable to penetrate into his body, and his spiritual power would have naturally expelled it. Therefore, that was her last chance to fight back, there wouldn't be a second chance. Sure enough, the next moment the leader's figure abruptly disappeared, and when he reappeared, a long sword that emitted fire spiritual power was in his hand as he fiercely thrust it towards Heshi's body. Heshi felt a burning pain from her chest and abdomen as the long sword pierced her body, causing scarlet blood to pour to the ground. Her body slowly became limp and she started to collapse, her eyes blurry. She could almost sense the vitality draining from her body bit by bit, while the Grim Reaper's sickle edged closer. Was she going to die? Just when she has started her new life, she is destined to quietly die in this wilderness? Unwilling. Really, unwilling. She still hasn't become stronger, her dantian still hasn't awakened, still haven't repaid Nangong Yu for helping her. How can she die like this? The lead assassin had a thought, then the long sword that was stabbed into Heshi's body suddenly flew out, returning to his hand. The bloodstains on the long sword had evaporated due to the fire, however, Heshi's body was now completely limp, and she toppled to her knees onto the pool of blood at her feet. Until this moment, the two assassins hadn't been able to relax, and the assassin on the left released a sigh. She was really just an ordinary person, so she didn't have any ability to resist Big Brother's sword. Unfortunately, Xiao Wu and Xiao Ba fell to her tricks. The lead assassin that was called Big Brother walked forward, and towering above the dying Heshi, he looked at her with an arrogant expression, his eyes full of hatred. Then, with a stern voice he said, I said before, that since you dared to kill my younger brother, that I would certainly tear your body to shreds, leaving you to die without a burial place. So slut, go die. Holding the long sword covered in flames up high, he suddenly brought it down, aiming towards Heshi. The assassin on the left excitedly retreated 2 steps, shouting loudly, chop off her 4 limbs first, cut this swine apart. I would like to see what tricks she can play then. Seeing the long sword heading towards her, and knowing that she had no hope of survival this time, Heshi desperately closed her eyes and gently pinched the throat-sealing blood poison in her hand. Rather than meeting her demise by assassins, she would rather end her own life. However, just when Heshi was about to swallow the poison, an overwhelming amount of spiritual pressure abruptly fell from the sky. Heshi's body that was almost touched by the long sword was now like a kite with its string snapped. After swaying side to side, she then fell to the ground with a crash. The assassins who just a moment ago were shouting in excitement, now felt the blood in their veins freeze. Due to the extreme fear of a strong martial artist, their whole bodies shivered, and with a pop, they landed on the ground in kneeling positions. Chapter 126, Drought Demon Organization, Heshi, A frightened and angry roar sounded at her ears, the voice so familiar yet so distant. Heshi was only half conscious, and as her body grew colder, she could feel that someone was holding her in their arms, gently removing the skin mask on her face. This person was slightly trembling as they embraced her in what felt like fear and regret, but so warm, so comforting. The corner of Heshi's mouth raised into a faint, gentle smile, before she then lost consciousness. Nangong Yu hugged Heshi tightly. Examining her heavily injured body, he didn't dare believe his own eyes. The girl's features under the mask were still delicate and beautiful, but her complexion was deathly pale, nearly transparent. Her phoenix eyes that always captivated him were now dull, devoid of light, as if at any time she would disappear from this world. A few days ago he was listening to Bai Hu's report, eating her specially prepared foods, and imagining her proud and playful appearance. He has always been looking forward to the day he would be able to meet with her. The day he would be able to lift the seal on her dantian, letting her depend on him more so that they would be inseparable. However, when he awoke this morning, what was waiting for him? It was to an alert from the imprint he left on Heshi's body, letting him know that she was being attacked. After he hurriedly rushed over, what he found is her dying. Nangong Yu's hands clenched tightly into fists, the light in his eyes scarlet flames that burned fiercely. At this moment, he was strongly trying to suppress a heaven-destroying, earth-extinguishing fury. He wanted to dismember the people who injured Heshi, crushing their bones to dust. Xier, you'll be fine. Nangong Yu gripped Heshi's hand, quickly transferring the pure essence of his spiritual power to her. You have me here, I definitely won't let something happen to you. The transferring of spiritual power to Heshi helped her weak breathing slowly become stable, while the fatal wound in her chest and abdomen indicated some signs of healing. Once he was sure that Heshi's life wasn't in immediate danger, it was only then that Nangong Yu raised his head, his scarlet eyes burning as he glared at the two assassins not far away. His icy voice contained a promise of deadly violence as he spoke. Drought Demon Organization, very good. In this world, there have been very few people who have been able to provoke me to anger, and yet you've managed it. Hell King, you are, Your Highness Hell King. The leader saw the Hell King's evil demon-like smile, and suddenly his eyes opened wide as he released a horrified shout. Isn't this the one who was called the #1 genius in Jinling Kingdom countless times the past few years? And when he reached Gold Core stage, the 9th heaven's black thunder fell, that His Highness Hell King? The one who even the royal family of Jinling Kingdom are afraid of, with his strength massacring countless troops from magical beasts, dyeing the Gui Jin mountain range red, that His Highness Hell King? That one who was bestowed the name, King of the Underworld, ruling over the life and death of the human world, controlling the 6 paths of reincarnation, completely ruthless when killing his enemies, that His Highness Hell King? The assassins sat blankly on the ground. Under Nangong Yu's fierce gaze, their bodies began to tremble all over. Heavens! In the end, what sort of mission had the Drought Demon Organization received? This clearly unremarkable girl, without any good looks, how could the Hell King have taken a fancy to her? No one who provoked the Hell King had been able to survive intact. This is the day the assassins from Drought Demon Organization would be annihilated. Mercy! Hell King, please spare us. The cultivation base of the leader was too low, so he couldn't help but feel fear in his heart, and crawling to Nangong Yu's feet, he said in a trembling voice, "We only received a mission, and we accepted money from that person, so on behalf of that person we were to kill her. We didn't really want to intentionally dispose of Miss Naylan. Please Hell King, spare us assassins from Drought Demon Organization." Chapter 127, Annihilated. Nangong Yu looked down at them with an indifferent expression, his bloodshot eyes covered with a layer of frost. "Speak. If you tell me who the mastermind is, I'll let the assassins from Drought Demon Organization off." That means that he really intends to destroy all of the assassins from Drought Demon Organization if they don't reveal anything. The hopeful expression on the leader's face crumpled, changing into one of utter despair. But, when facing this excessively strong young man, he didn't have any courage to resist answering, We don't know who requested the mission. All the Drought Demon Organization deals with is receiving the mission from the black market. We just take the money without asking questions." Since this is the case, the corner of Nangong Yu's mouth raised into a cruel smile, "Then your existence is unnecessary." He had barely spoken, when a bright ball of spiritual power suddenly formed on his slightly raised left hand. The assassin kneeling at Nangong Yu's feet screamed with fear and he wanted to flee, but without being able to take even a single step, the ball of spiritual power wrapped itself around his body, and that of the other assassin. Soon after their bodies felt like there was something drilling into them, and the surface of their skin began to swell with uneven bumps. Ah 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 ah. The assassins screamed in pain, and following that their bodies ripped apart, leaving only blood and bones splattered around. However, the ball of spiritual power hadn't finished its destruction yet, continuing to burn the blood and bones with a faint blue flame until it completely eroded everything, leaving nothing but ash. Only then did the spiritual fire slowly disappear without a trace. Nangong Yu glanced at the wind spreading the ash of the 2 assassins into the air. Then sneering, he held Heshi, and rapidly flew back to Hell King Manor. Hell King Manor. Qing Long, Bai Hu, and Zhu Ke were standing at the gate. From time to time they would look at the sky with worried expressions. Bai Hu incessantly muttered out of nervousness, "It's already reached this point, the time when Master's illness is about to flare, so why would he suddenly go out? Why has he still not returned?" At this moment, Zhu Ke, who was standing next to him, had her face covered with a veil, concealing that eye-catching scar. Hearing what was said, her eyes filled with worry. "Qing Long, do you know why Master went out today, leaving his closed-door cultivation early?" It was to lift the seal on Shiyu, the genius Dr. Shi's Dantian. Of course Qing Long knew what his master went out to do, and he extremely disagreed with it. But Master is the master, and as long as he is commanded not to say anything, even if Qing Long was anxious, he would never speak without permission. He has always been quiet from the beginning, refusing to answer any questions, so Bai Hu and Zhu Ke weren't surprised. However, as Qing Long looked at the sky for a long while, a gloomy expression covered his face and he opened his mouth to say, Bai Hu, Zhu Ke, if someone's existence will harm Master, but Master wouldn't hesitate to protect him, what would you do? Bai Hu answered, of course Master's will is the priority. While Zhu Ke answered, of course the cheap person who will threaten Master must be killed. The two people almost responded in unison, and after they finished speaking they looked at each other in dismay, each with a complicated expression on their face. Even Qing Long's eyebrows were creased, his face twisted. Just then, Qing Long's expression lit up and he shouted with a low voice, Master's returned. The next moment, Nangong Yu descended from the sky with his robes floating around him, landing by Hell King Manor's big gate. Qing Long was just about to come forward, wanting to follow, when suddenly he looked at the bloody figure in Master's arms, his eyes opening wide. Master, is this genius Dr. Shi? Chapter 128, Closed Door Healing. Heshi's appearance at this time was still bright, elegant, and exquisite, but because her disguise was removed, coupled with her hair loose and blowing in the wind, with just a glance Qing Long was able to see that this is genius Dr. Shi, and that she is a girl. Moreover, her appearance is so devastatingly beautiful that it is capable of causing the downfall of a city. It was even more impressive when you factored in that she is only a young girl yet has peerless medical expertise. Qing Long sucked in a gulp of cold air. He was always calm and collected yet couldn't help but blurt out, genius Dr. Shi is a woman? It's no wonder then. No wonder that Master cared about and cherished her so much, no wonder that on the carriage Master was like that, with her. Standing on the side, Zhu Ke was also able to recognize Heshi's identity with just a glance. Yet when she noticed that Heshi's sallow and ugly face has now become so beautiful, both her hands clenched tightly, while her heart raged the words, impossible, impossible, repeatedly. This abominable slut. First she destroyed her appearance, making her ashamed to appear in front of Master. Now she exposed a delicate, pitiful, and charming fox-like appearance to seduce Master, so shameless. It's simply too shameless. Zhu Ke's eyes reddened, and firmly glaring at the unconscious Heshi, she was unaware that the veil on her face had slipped off. She wanted to rush over and tear that face apart, pull her out from Nangong Yu's arms and ruthlessly throw her to the ground. The hate born out of jealousy in her heart was like a burning flame, causing the scar on her face to constantly twist. Resembling a centipede crawling on her beautiful face, it made her features look distorted and hideous. Yet why would Nangong Yu care about the reactions of his subordinates at this time? Glancing at the girl in his arms whose breathing was gradually growing weaker, his eyes darkened as he coldly said, I will heal Shi Er behind closed doors, prepare the best medicinal pills and send them in. Qing Long, you guard the door, without my order no one is allowed to enter. Qing Long always obeyed Nangong Yu's orders, yet when he heard what was he said his heart thumped loudly, and looking at Heshi he murmured, Master, it's time for you to. Nangong Yu's icy gaze sharply swept over Qing Long, instantly silencing him. His eyebrows creased as he followed behind Nangong Yu. Yet Zhu Ke was finally unable to bear it any longer and rushed over, landed to her knees with plop in front of Nangong Yu, and cried as she said, Master, you are now at the moment between life and death, you absolutely cannot harm your body for an insignificant person. If Master wants to save Miss Naylan, you may hand her over to this subordinate. This subordinate is a 5th-ranked doctor, I'll certainly be able to heal Miss Naylan's injury. That's right, Master. Even Bai Hu could no longer endure it and said, Genius, Miss Naylan seems to have only suffered superficial wounds, and Zhu Ke's medical expertise is excellent, so there'll definitely be no problem for her to treat her injury. Master, you should quickly return to closed-door cultivation, otherwise, other people may not have realized, but they were trusted subordinates. They were able to clearly detect that Nan Gong-yu's originally fair skin had now become more transparent, and that the blood flow in his body had also begun to slow, causing his hands and feet to gradually turn cold. While it looked like nothing judging by the master's appearance, in truth, his body is suffering from great pain. Nan Gong-yu didn't even look at Zhu Kei as he sneeringly said, "My matters are not for all of you to decide. Qing Long, don't make me order you a second time." "Master!" Zhu Kei exclaimed, but when she raised her head again, she didn't see Master's figure anymore. Nan Gong-yu's bedroom was restricted in Hell King manner, so as the bedroom door firmly closed, Qing Long took up a position outside the door to guard it, his face cold and calm. Chapter 129, Cold Blood. Zhu Kei bitterly glared at him, her voice piercing to their ears. "Qing Long, what are you doing? Do you want to let that slut kill Master? Quickly get out of the way, let me go in to save Master." Qing Long's face was expressionless as he faintly said, "Master's orders. Regardless of whether it's wrong or not, I refuse to disobey." No matter how much Zhu Kei insulted or screamed, Qing Long remained completely unmoved. His cultivation base is the highest amongst them, so although they're all gold core stage martial artists, even if Zhu Kei and Bai Hu joined together to fight him, they wouldn't necessarily win. Thus, the people outside the bedroom door were deadlocked. Inside the bedroom, Nan Gong-yu carefully placed Heshi on his bed. He is a person with misophobia, so apart from a servant boy being allowed to come and sweep this bedroom, no one else is allowed to enter. For him, his bed is his to personally use, nobody has permission to touch it. But now, seeing Heshi's blood dye his bed red, he didn't feel the slightest bit of disgust, all he felt was panic and distress. His she-heir should be willful, arrogant, and cold, she shouldn't be like she is now, dying and looking like she will disappear at any time. Nan Gong-yu very carefully untied Heshi's outer clothes, and grabbing the medicine that Qing Long brought in a moment ago, he sprinkled it over her horrific wound. The medicine in Hell King manner is naturally all high grade, so as soon as the following medicine made contact with her flesh, whether it is an injury caused by a sword or a wound from being struck by thunder, the speed of healing could clearly be seen by the naked eye. However, when all the wounds were healed, Heshi's breathing was still growing weaker, her pale face expressionless. Nan Gong-yu held her icy body in his embrace, fear bubbling up in his heart. This is the first time since birth that he has experienced such feelings. Fear, panic, terrified that the girl in his arms will leave him, and from then on he will no longer be able to see or touch her. He pondered for a moment, and finally made a firm resolution. From the storage ring on his finger he withdrew a simple and unadorned jade box. Opening the jade box, a scorching heat wave assaulted his senses. It was the yuan-yang fruit that Heshi gave to Nan Gong-yu. Compared to 1 month ago, the yuan-yang fruit is still hot, yet the fierce heat from the yang has become milder, purer. Furthermore, any impurities harmful to the human body have vanished. This is the result of Nan Gong-yu using his own body temperature and continuously cooling it down for a month. Unfortunately, that is not enough. Even if the yang of the yuan-yang fruit has been refined, Heshi's weak and ordinary body will still be burned by the heat once she consumes the yuan-yang fruit. Therefore, she would need a yin object to act as a guide and neutralize the heat before she could use the yuan-yang fruit. Nan Gong-yu wrapped the yuan-yang fruit in his spiritual power, and pinching Heshi's chin, he slowly placed the yuan-yang fruit into her mouth. Once the yuan-yang fruit entered her body, Heshi suddenly groaned. Her pale complexion abruptly changing into a scorching red color. Soon, that fiery blaze spread from her dantian, burning through her meridians and skin, burning her to what felt like ashes. Nan Gong-yu suddenly bowed his head, deeply kissing those bright red lips. Lips and teeth intertwined, body fluids mixed, and gradually the trace of yin blood flowed between the mouths of the two people touching, slowly running down Heshi's fair and translucent collarbone. Lost in unconsciousness, Heshi could only feel her whole body burning. Every vein in her body, every meridian, it all felt like it was being burnt by hot oil. Chapter 130, Blood Contract. Next, this kind of heat slowly permeated to her bones, roasting her, burning her, as if at any time she would be burnt to ashes. A painful groan was released from Heshi's mouth, her eyebrows frowning tightly as the intense pain made her whole body begin to spasm and struggle. Her throat almost unable to hold back a shrill scream. Just when it became unbearable, there was a sudden flow of icy liquid. It passed through her lips, glided down her throat, and entered her internal organs. In a flash spreading throughout her entire body. So comfortable, so refreshing, I want more. Heshi couldn't help but let out a pleased sigh, her hands instinctively extending to hold on to something. Her mouth released a hoarse groan, then her lips used their full strength to suck harder, so as to be able to absorb more of the icy liquid. The next moment, Heshi felt whatever was embracing her suddenly tighten, as if it wanted to merge with her body. The soft lips pressing against hers abruptly hardened, speeding up with passion, as if they were trying to conquer her mouth. The icy liquid slowly infiltrated her body, making the blood in her veins heat up. But this kind of heat didn't cause her pain, instead, it made her cling harder as she lost herself to the comfort she was feeling. Indulging in their fiery passion, Heshi and Nangongyu hadn't yet realized that along with the Yang spiritual power being neutralized by the Yin blood, the essence of the Yuan Yang fruit began to slowly be absorbed by Heshi's dantian. Heshi's dried-up dantian that had been oddly sealed firmly, had now become a huge spiritual power vortex. The whirlpool steadily grew larger, picking up speed. Suddenly, a glaring white light burst from Heshi's body, soon after spreading throughout the vast world. As Qing Long stood guard outside the iron gate, with Zhu Ke and Bai Hu standing opposite him, the faint smell of blood leaked out from the crack under the gate. Abruptly, their expressions changed. The spiritual power within the three people's bodies burst forth, while the blood essence in their chests surged forward, as if it wanted to fly into the room. Zhu Ke's face distorted once again, and hissing she said, "It's Master. Master's using his blood essence to treat that slut. They all have a permanent master-servant contract with the Hell King. It wouldn't matter whether their master's chi energy was weak or strong, or if they were thousands of miles apart, they would still be able to sense him. A martial artist's blood essence, one, also known as heart blood, represented their life. If Master gave his blood essence to Heshi, he would be dividing his own life and chi energy, giving half to her." The three people's expressions become extremely unsightly, and when they looked towards the tightly closed gate, their eyes filled with anxiousness and anger. Zhu Ke rushed to Qing Long, screaming, "Qing Long, do you know what it means for Master to lose some of his blood essence now? It's almost time for his illness to show up. If Master does this again, he'll be unable to survive. Do you still want to block us? Are you still not letting me go in to kill that slut?" Qing Long's face showed his internal struggle. His expression was of one experiencing pain, while the veins on his hand that was holding a sword bulged, his joints cracking. Zhu Ke still wanted to say more, when suddenly, several figures quickly descended from the sky. Without waiting to properly land and gain their balance, the people immediately rushed over to the three people standing by the gate and shouted, "We sensed Master's chi dwindling and our blood contracts flared. What has happened to Master?" The people that had arrived were several other contract servants under Nangongyu that had been away from Yanjing City recently, Xian Wu, Tu, Wu Xian, and Wu Yu. Once Zhu Ke saw Wu Xian and Wu Yu, she immediately couldn't help but start crying, "Big brother Wu Xian, big brother Wu Yu, Master is inside currently using his own blood essence to save an ordinary woman. But it's soon time for Master's illness to show up, if he's not stopped and treated, I'm really afraid that Master, one, blood essence, also known as heart blood, is basically lifeblood or life force. Powerful techniques sometimes require cultivators to expend their essence, shortening their lifespan as a result." 2. Xian Wu equals Black Tortoise. He is the fourth mythological named character, joining Zhu Ke, Vermilion Bird/Phoenix, Qing Long, Azure Dragon, and Bai Hu, White Tiger. Chapter 131, Spiritual Power Vortex. Wu Xian's cold eyes flashed with a deep killing intent, and stepping forward in large strides, he wanted to rush into Nan Gongyu's bedroom. However, Qing Long stepped forward to block him. Master has commanded that without his order, no one is allowed to enter. Wu Xian's sharp gaze landed on Qing Long as he coldly said, Qing Long, do you think you can stop me? Moreover, don't forget that our first priority is to ensure Master's safety. He had barely finished speaking when his eyes flashed with a cold light, while a fierce amount of spiritual pressure was released from his body. Qing Long dodged too late, the jolt from the spiritual pressure pushing him back several steps. His complexion became somewhat pale and unsightly. Qing Long, Bai Hu, Zhu Ke, and Xian Wu were each given a code name after one of the four divine beasts. To the public, they are known as Nan Gongyu's personal bodyguards. Unknown to most though is that Nan Gongyu had four other guards that he had secretly trained. They were given code names after the four ferocious beasts, Wu Xian, Wu Yu, Wu Nian, and Wu Go. They were guards trained to offer their life for their master, no matter the danger to themselves. All 8 people were experts in their respective fields, each a leader in charge of their own force. However, as teams, Qing Long is the leader of the 4 great divine beasts, with Wu Xian the leader of the 4 great ferocious beasts. Wu Xian's team was slightly stronger than Qing Long's team. After Wu Xian pushed Qing Long aside, he focused his spiritual power in his palm, using it to open the iron gate leading into Nan Gongyu's courtyard. The iron gate had just opened, when before anyone could enter the courtyard, they were abruptly blinded by a bright flash of white light. Next, it was like a sudden gale started in the courtyard, causing the leaves on the ground to scatter in the air. These sudden storm clouds seemed like a foreshadowing of trouble ahead. Wu Xian's complexion changed, and rushing to stand in front of Nan Gongyu's bedroom door, he roughly pushed it open. However, as soon as Wu Xian and the others entered the room, their expressions stiffened as they blankly stared at the curtain in front of them. The curtain hung from the bed and fluttered in the cool breeze, along with the tassels and clothes surrounding it. Behind the lightly fluttering curtain, alternately hidden from view and then visible, Nan Gongyu and He were tightly embracing each other. With their lips plastered together, it was difficult to distinguish their expressions. The corner Wu Xian's mouth twitched, along with everyone else's. Awkwardly shuffling their feet, they didn't know what to do with their hands or where to look. This is the first time that they had ever seen their cold-hearted master display such unbridled passion. He was always emotionless, yet now he is behaving like he is intoxicated. However, before Wu Xian and the others could return to their senses, a vortex could suddenly be seen by the naked eye, slowly forming between the two people. The vortex spun, first absorbing the spiritual power in the room, and gradually accelerating its speed as it slowly expanded. Once it shrouded Wu Xian and the others, it then spread outside the room. As Wu Xian stood absent-minded, he unexpectedly felt a great invisible force start to suction out the spiritual power from within his body. What's going on here? How could this be? With shock written across everyone's faces, they hurriedly set up protective barriers around their bodies, capable of resisting that suction. Fortunately, after they set up the protective barriers around their bodies, the suction disappeared without a trace. No. More precisely, the suction bypassed them, following the vortex to spread out to surrounding areas. Wu Xian gazed towards the delicate and slender girl on the bed, his eyes showing bewilderment. Is this strange vortex created by this woman? Was this why Master insisted on risking his life to save her? In the end, just who is she? Slut, why with Master? Get off him. Go die. A shrill scream suddenly reached their ears. Wu Xian and the others turned their heads, only to find Zhu Ke looking insane as she rushed towards the 2 intimate people on the bed. Chapter 132, Unlucky Zhu Ke. As Zhu Ke stood there, the huge vortex hovered over her, and little by little, it suctioned out many years' worth of her accumulated spiritual power that she had cultivated. Her complexion aged and withered at a speed naked to the eye, yet she was completely unaware of it. Zhu Kei's entire body trembled as she became devoid of rationality, and she rushed towards He in the center of the vortex. It is unknown when, but she was now holding a dagger, the tip shining a strange blue-green. Obviously it is smeared with something highly poisonous. A crazy smile was plastered across Zhu Kei's lips. Even if she had to risk her cultivation base, she must kill this woman, she must get revenge of the hatred due to her disfigurement. Furthermore, she will not let this slut snatch master away. Zhu Kei, you can't. Qing Long and the others exclaimed, their complexions suddenly changing. However, it was too late, the sharp dagger blurring as it was fiercely stabbed towards He. But the expected eruption of blood didn't happen. On the contrary, Zhu Kei, who had rushed over, screamed, and with her body resembling a kite flying off after its string is broken, she flew around the room, finally crashing into a wall. She spit out a mouthful of blood, denial and hatred in her eyes as she glanced at He, then fainted with disappointment written across her features. Bai Hu looked at her worriedly, whispering, Zhu Kei didn't form a protective barrier over herself before she fainted, her cultivation base. Humph, she valued her jealousy more than master's safety. She reaps what she sowed. Wu Xian's cold and pitiless words instantly dispelled Bai Hu's intention of helping Zhu Quebec. Just at this moment, Nangong Yu suddenly opened his eyes in the center of the vortex. He first thoroughly examined Hexi's body using his spiritual power, to make sure she wasn't in any danger, then, his cold dark eyes swept around the room, finally landing on several of his subordinates outside the door. Wu Xian and the others felt their bodies quiver all over under the gaze of those cruel, icy red eyes, to the point that they were almost unable to maintain their protective barriers. Nangong Yu coldly snorted, then said in a low voice, "No, next time. Whoever dares to violate my orders in the future, don't even bother to appear in front of me again." As he finished speaking, he waved his hand, and the door that was knocked open by Wu Xian closed in a flash, firmly sealed with a spiritual power enchantment. Wu Xian gasped for breath, his face sagging into an expression of relief after the terror he had felt. Just a moment ago, Master's expression when he had looked at him was really too frightening. Wu Yu frowned while muttering next to him, "It's close to the time for Master's illness to show up. If Master is like this now, what will happen to him later? Will he be okay?" They all looked at each other in dismay, sinking into a depressed silence. At this time, everyone worrying in the courtyard of Hell King Manor wouldn't know, but that vortex which had first only affected the 6 of them, had now swept throughout Yanjing City. Apart from Nangong Yu, no one knew that in the center of this vortex, the seal on Hexi's dantian is gradually lifting. At this moment, Hexi's dantian resembled a dissatisfied and greedy black hole. Countless amounts of spiritual energy was being sucked in, but when the spiritual energy was completely absorbed, it was still unsatisfied. The vortex continued to expand, and the fierce wind began to strengthen abruptly, causing dust and sand to fly everywhere. While the spiritual energy that was drawn into the vortex, regardless of whether it was from the air or the vegetation, was completely absorbed. Demonic beasts in the forest rampaged, their bodies all emitting a harsh light as they resisted their spiritual energy being absorbed with all their strength. In the sky of Yanjing City, martial artists riding on flying swords suddenly felt the swords under their feet start buzzing, and no longer able to transfer their spiritual power, they fell down from the sky one by one. Fortunately, every martial artist that is able to fly possessed a magical tool that would protect their body and save their life, so they were luckily able to escape from an ending of becoming a meat patty. Chapter 133, Demon Day and Night in Yanjing City. For anyone that is a cultivator, when they tried to absorb spiritual power, they discovered that not only were they unable to absorb any, but instead, an invisible force was extracting the spiritual power within their bodies. All the martial artists turned pale with fright, and immediately, they took out all kinds of spiritual talismans and magical tools to resist this powerful suction. However, this force was much larger than they expected, so other than martial artists at gold core stage or higher who were able to form protective barriers, the rest of the martial artists, no matter how powerful a magical item they used, they couldn't stop the spiritual power dissipating within their bodies. At this time in Yanjing City, alleyways that are normally silent as soon as the sun set, were instead in chaos. Even the older generations from large influential families that were in closed-door cultivation were alarmed, having come out earlier. Every major family, including Jean Ling's royal family, all sent out troops to inquire and investigate the source of why they were unable to use their spiritual power. Unfortunately, since all the martial artists were unable to use their full strength, they naturally couldn't find the source of this weird phenomenon. Suddenly, the absorption of spiritual power sped up, and in the sky above Yanjing City, there appeared a huge white vortex, visible to the naked eye. The vortex rotated faster and faster, while its size grew larger and larger. Hovering above Yanjing City, it resembled a white sun, lighting up the entire city. Heavens, what's that? Is this vortex absorbing our spiritual power? In the end, what is this? All the martial artists in Yanjing City rushed outside to look at the glaring white vortex. Suddenly, someone shouted out, "Demon Day and Night has arrived, this is the beginning of the Demon Day and Night." Once these words were said, all the martial artists burst out in a huge uproar, horror expressed on everyone's faces. Demon Day and Night, could this really be the world's biggest calamity, Demon Day and Night? Doesn't that mean, the big calamity will soon descend upon the Luo continent? In the distance, a man with the appearance of an evildoer, with long and narrow phoenix eyes, was at this moment standing on the summit of a mountain. Looking at the white light in the distant east that was just like a scorching sun, the corner of his mouth raised into a brilliant smile. After waiting for so long, finally, has it finally appeared? At this point, in the center of the vortex, He wasn't the slightest bit aware that she had caused something strange. Currently unconscious, her originally dried up and empty dantian was little by little being filled. The meridians throughout her body were being nourished by the pure essence of spiritual power, and after circulating around her body 12 times, it then returned to her dantian. The last seal that remained on her dantian had now been destroyed, eroding away with the pure spiritual power, causing Heshi's cultivation base to rapidly increase in stages. Early stage of qi refining, middle stage of qi refining, peak of qi refining. Nangong Yu slightly raised an eyebrow as he watched the cultivation base of the girl in his arms rising. Slowly it broke through to the qi refining stage, and from the qi refining stage, in a flash it rose to the advanced rank of the foundation establishment stage. Yet despite this, the growth of her cultivation base still didn't stop. Such a frightening advancing speed, if other martial artists were to see it they would certainly be scared to the point that their eyes would fall from their sockets. Nangong Yu bowed his head, kissing the girl's warm and soft, rose-petal lips. So although the blood within his body had begun to freeze, causing his body to tremble in pain, while his skin is pale and transparent, seeming as if it will crack at any time, his lips still formed a gentle and soft smile. At the same time, Heshi's space was also undergoing earth-shaking changes. Chapter 134, High-rank foundation establishment stage. The bottom of the ninth secluded spirit spring boiled, a vortex hovered above ancient Rhyme's spiritual field, and a click could be heard from every door in Shumi Palace. And inside Shumi Palace, inside one of the empty rooms, the constantly leaping light within the huge egg suddenly froze. Cracks now started to appear across its formerly smooth surface, as if something was about to break out of it. Warm sunshine shone in from outside, illuminating Heshi's body. The speck of golden light flickered across her beautiful and delicate face, resembling a naughty spirit, causing her to wake. With her long eyelashes slightly trembling, Heshi frowned as she slowly opened her eyes. Just as she was about to move her body, she suddenly released a pained groan. Her whole body felt like it had been crushed by elephants running over it. The ache was unbearable, especially the meridians within her body, they felt like they had been pulled by something. Even moving one finger was painful. He took a deep breath, wanting to soothe her body by running her internal energy through it, yet unexpectedly, her dantian slightly responded as well. There was the pure essence of spiritual power overflowing from her dantian, and in a flash, it spread to the meridians throughout her body. Under the nourishment from the spiritual power circulating, the pain in her meridians slowly soothed, gradually helping her limbs to become more flexible. The feeling resembled a whole-body massage, and He couldn't help but sigh due to the comfortableness of it. Suddenly, her expression changed and she abruptly sat up. With the spiritual power in her dantian working, and using the awareness of divine sense, to be able to see clearly, she could watch the spiritual power slowly wandering about in her meridians. When the spiritual power reached the meridian running to her hand, He's mind focused, and in the next moment, a multicolored ball of light formed on her palm. Shocked, she lost her focus, and the multicolored ball of light instantly disappeared. How could this be? Her dantian is unsealed. Moreover, the spiritual power within her dantian had raised her cultivation base to at least 9th rank of the foundation establishment stage. Her memories from before she lost consciousness slowly overflowed, and she remembered that she was being chased by several Meridian stage assassins who wanted to kill her, so she had fled into Tsang Mountain. Although she had tried every method to deal with them, even managing to kill 2 of them, in the end, there was still a gap in their strength and hers, and the enemy had stabbed her through the chest and abdomen with a sword. Yet now her body wasn't injured, while her skin was even more exquisite and translucent than before. Even the white whip scars marring her skin had completely disappeared. So is she really completely awake? Furthermore, in such a short while she had managed to jump over the chi refining stage, landing on a high rank of the foundation establishment stage. He's heart filled with joy. After transmigrating, her strength had been too weak, and she had had no way to advance as her dantian was sealed, so all along she was anxious. The majestic Bai Wuchang, too, the organization's youngest gold medal killer since the beginning of history, had unexpectedly fallen to the point of being called trash in a different world. Now that she had finally broken her shackles, and advanced to the foundation establishment stage in such a short while, how could she not be happy? One must know that apart from here, the prodigy-filled Hell King Manor, that throughout all of Yanjing City there is only a few Meridian stage martial artists. While it was possible to count the amount of gold core stage martial artists with only 10 fingers. In her memories, Nailan Feishue was called a talented martial artist because it had only taken her 2 years to reach the early stages of the foundation establishment stage. As she laughed lightly, she couldn't help but spread her palm out once again, and very soon, another multicolored ball of light filled with spiritual power appeared on her palm. Focusing her mind, she subtly controlled the spiritual power, and without much effort that multicolored ball of light turned red, representing the fire element. He's eyes shone, and the red-colored ball of spiritual power soon became blue, representing the water element. 1. Divine Sense, an ability possessed by cultivators to scan their surroundings, far beyond the limits of their ordinary 5 senses, with their spirit. The total area they can scan corresponds to the strength of their spirit. 2. Bai Wuchang, White Impermanence. He's assassin name from her past life. Chapter 135, Soft and White Meat Ball. According to her thoughts, she was unexpectedly able to change the ball of spiritual power into 5 different colors, as well as combine them. However, don't common martial artists only have a single white color to represent their spiritual power? Even double attribute spiritual roots display a milky white color. Furthermore, the more spiritual roots a person has, and the more spiritual power they use, the white ball of light would appear dusky, like a muddy moon. Suddenly, a young and tender child's voice sounded in He's mind, "Silly mother, this is because mother's cultivation is the 5 elements of spiritual power, so of course there are 5 different colors." He was surprised at first, then she realized that this familiar child's voice belonged to Dandan. But, didn't Dandan say that when she was outside her space, they would be unable to communicate? Yet now she could clearly hear Dandan's voice from inside her space, so didn't that mean that Dandan had also risen in rank? Heshi's heart pounded, and in a flash her consciousness entered her space. Once she entered her space, Heshi felt that the spiritual energy was now more than 10 times richer than it previously was as it assaulted her senses. Before she had a chance to look around at the changes in her space though, she suddenly felt something round run into her arms with a thump. Heshi staggered back several steps, before she then steadied herself with difficulty, raising the small thing in her arms in front of her eyes. This is a smooth, soft and white meatball, or jelly to be more precise. Touching it feels really good, it was cool, soft, and its color resembled silky milk. Anyone who looked at it will crave to swallow it. On top of the meatball is a small round head, and on its small head it didn't have hair, but 2 slender antennae. At this moment that small head was slightly tilted, its antennae gently swaying, while a pair of big, watery, jet black eyes occupied half of its face, staring with a fixed gaze at Heshi. For short, small, and fat lotus root-like limbs incessantly moved, and a pitiful protest came out from its mouth, "Mother, mother. Dandan feels uncomfortable when you carry me like this. Mother, Dandan wants to be hugged." Those big black eyes blinked, brimming with childlike admiration and longing as they looked at Heshi, so although Heshi has a cold and emotionless heart, when being looked at by these adorable eyes, of course her heart would be moved. She blinked and asked, "You're Dandan?" "Mshum." Dandan nodded. Suddenly it struggled to free itself from Heshi's raised hands, and with one jump, it hung itself around Heshi's neck. "Mother, I'm Dandan. Dandan missed you so much." Feeling its soft and jelly-like texture touch her face and rub lightly, acting like a spoiled child who would throw a tantrum, Heshi simply didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She grabbed it from her neck, but this time adjusted the way she held it so it could be comfortable. Looking at its plump body, she frowned, "How come you're so fat? Letting you eat, and eat every day, now look. Now you've turned into a rolling ball." Dandan heard this and immediately started crying. "Dandan not fat. Dandan's originally like this, mother dislikes me, wah, alright. Dandan's the cutest, Dandan's the slimmest. Mother doesn't dislike you, will this do?" Heshi appeased it for half a day, and only then did the overly sensitive, spoilt, spiritual pet feel good. She recalled its words from just a moment ago, and asked, "What did you mean when you said the 5 elements of spiritual power?" 5 elements of spiritual power, wasn't it 5 spiritual roots? The 5 spiritual roots in a cultivation world were known as useless spiritual roots, and that was practically what her previously crippled dantian was. But it seemed that when referring to her spiritual power, it wasn't the same. Chapter 136, Promoted Space. Dandan bit a finger, blinking its big eyes as it looked at Heshi. The 5 elements of spiritual power are metal, wood, water, fire, and earth, 5 types of spiritual power. "Mother, you don't even know about this?" Heshi held her forehead. She shouldn't have had hope for Dandan's IQ. Moreover, this guy obviously didn't know anything, yet it had an expression on its face that showed it thought she was stupid. "Fine. I'll just ignore you, we'll see whether you'll be able to be good or not." Heshi no longer paid any attention to this little imp, and turning her head, she began to examine the changes in her space. That's right, after only one night, Heshi had not only lifted the seal on her dantian, promoting to foundation establishment stage, but Dandan had hatched from its egg, while her space had also experienced a big change. Originally vast, the ancient rhyme spiritual field now expanded further away than the naked eye could see, and the spiritual herbs that grew in her space had all matured in one night. One must know that in Miluo continent, spiritual herbs are graded by years. For example, the growth period for a first-grade spiritual herb is 10 years, for a second-grade spiritual herb it's 100 years, for a third-grade spiritual herb it's 1,000 years, for a fourth-grade spiritual herb it's 5,000 years, and for a fifth-grade spiritual herb it's 10,000 years. It's very difficult to find spiritual herbs that are 5th grade and higher, and it's not so easy to distinguish how old they are. Originally, the ancient rhyme spiritual field could accelerate a plant's growth period 100-fold, but for 1st or 2nd grade spiritual herbs to grow into 3rd grade spiritual herbs, it still requires a long process. Yet now, in only one night, several stalks of 3rd grade spiritual herbs had matured. What made Hashi even more amazed is that a portion of 1st grade spiritual plants in her space had unexpectedly advanced to 2nd grade spiritual plants. In Mi Luo continent, this kind of situation was unheard of. Hashi quickly walked to the 9th secluded spirit spring, noticing that from its outward appearance, nothing had changed in the spirit spring. But, when she cupped her hands to try and drink a mouthful, she felt that compared to its previous rich spiritual energy, it had now increased several times in such a short while, nourishing the 5 viscera and 6 bowels in her body. With such potent spiritual power infusing her meridians, not only did she not feel pain, instead, she was so comfortable she released a sigh. It seems that even the 9th secluded spirit spring has promoted. Hashi was pleased and noticed Dandan imitating her by leaning on the side of spirit spring, its small head stretching over to drink a mouthful of spring water. Yet after drinking just 2 mouthfuls, it suddenly raised its body, flinging the water off its head, and said with a deflated expression, "No taste, it's not tasty at all." Hashi was amused by Dandan's small appearance, despising the water. She then discovered that since the spiritual plants in her space had matured, and that the spiritual energy is so rich, Dandan is no longer interested. Even the 9th secluded spirit spring is actually being despised by him. "You're a little guy that doesn't know what's good. Before, as long as it contains spiritual energy, wouldn't you happily eat it all? Now that you've grown up, you've actually learned to be picky about food." Dandan hugged Hashi's arm, its body hanging off her as it acted like a spoiled child, and said, "Mother makes the best foods to eat, Dandan could eat it for a lifetime and will never dislike it." "Mother, Dandan hungry, so hungry. I want to eat Mother's tasty roast chicken, cake, and rabbit meat." Black lines appeared on Hashi's forehead. She felt that this little guy did nothing but eat when it was in the egg, and now that it's hatched it's become a picky eater. In the future, will it keep eating till she becomes a pauper? Hashi didn't know, but ever since Dandan had been eating the spiritual foods that she made, its appetite had begun to be wicked, as previously Dandan had no way to refuse it if it wanted to break out of its shell. But after hatching, it has a human sense of taste and aesthetics, leading it to begin avoiding things with spiritual energy but no taste. Of course, if the spiritual energy is rich to a certain extent, Dandan will still ignore the taste and drool. Chapter 137, Spirit Firmament Palace. However, thinking about it now, Hashi herself is also hungry. Just before she was chased by the assassins, she had made a lot of food and placed it safely in a room in Shumi Palace, specifically finding a cabinet to organize and store different foods. Remembering it now made her salivate. One must know that the time in Shumi Palace has practically stopped, so the food stored inside, no matter how long it is left there, is still exactly the same as when it was stored. So when it's removed, even the steam wouldn't have dissipated. Arriving at the front of Shumi Palace, Hashi was surprised to discover that even Shumi Palace has gone through some strange changes. Shumi Palace has 81 doors, and in total there are 9 palaces all grouped together, 9 doors to every palace. Yet because most of the doors were closed, Hashi was unable to see what was inside them. Therefore, up until now Hashi had only known what the first palace is called, the Spirit Firmament Palace. The only door open there was the first room where Dandan was placed. But now, after her space had promoted, the originally locked 8 doors had unexpectedly disappeared. There was now only one door remaining with the words, Spirit Firmament Door, on top of it, and at this moment it was closed. Hashi slowly pushed the door open, and in a flash, her mind was suddenly filled with vague information. 9th palace in heaven, this is Spirit Firmament. All living things are for thou to use. The door completely opened, and the first thing Hashi saw is 8 jade boxes floating in the air, surrounded by flickering white light. The shape of these jade boxes is quite ordinary, and on the jade boxes a simple totem is carved. He felt that she had seen this totem somewhere before. Each jade box is surrounded by a milky white, close to transparent light, and the jade boxes floated around the room on this light, like mischievous imps. She reached out her hand to catch them, yet they darted away before she could even grab one. Her eyes were following one of the jade boxes, when her gaze fell to the left corner of the room, and suddenly she was so shocked she nearly jumped. She saw an extremely familiar storage rack, and arranged on it had been her cooking tools, etc. Clearly the spirit firmament door was Dandan's former location. But now, that corner is in a mess. The small doors on the storage rack were open, empty bowls and plates were piled in a heap, while there were several chewed bones thrown to the ground. Veins appeared on Heshi's forehead, and turning around, she saw Dandan duck its small head. With the appearance of a guilty conscience, it secretly tried to slip away, immediately letting Heshi know who the culprit is. She extended out her hand, grabbed its neck, and lifted it before her eyes, darkly asking, "Dandan, did you eat these things?" Dandan ducked its small head again, pitifully replying, "Mother, I was hungry, when I climbed out of the egg, hungry, so I eat." The corner of Heshi's mouth twitched, this cabinet was full of food. "You've eaten so much, yet you still dare to shout at me that you're hungry?" Her braised moon chicken, roasted cloud rabbit, preserved porcupine leg, 2 full storage racks of food. She spent a lot of crystal stones to buy the ingredients, and little by little built up a stockpile, yet unexpectedly, it was all finished overnight. Moreover, when she looked Dandan up and down, it looked so small, how could it eat so much food? The amount of food was 10 times the size of it. Dandan's mouth flattened, and weeping, it said in a sorrowful child's voice, "Dandan's body is growing, of course I will be hungry." "Mother, don't get angry, okay." Heshi felt helpless, she was unable to find a way to deal with this terrible eater of food. Chapter 138, Divine Sense Imprint. Heshi put Dandan back on the ground, but it immediately tried to take advantage of her and clung to the bottom of her clothes, shouting about being hungry. This time Heshi completely ignored its spoiled child act, spreading out her hands. "Everything was eaten by you, where would I get the ingredients from in such a short time? I have no energy either, so there's nothing I can do, you'll just have to starve. Furthermore, I want you to clean up this mess you made, otherwise, you'll never eat the food that I make again." Finished speaking, she no longer cared about Dandan's tantrum, and instead started to examine the jade boxes. Dandan yelled for half a day, but after realizing that Heshi was really angry and was refusing to acknowledge him, he couldn't but help drop its small head, its antennae softly drooping. All of a sudden, the antennae on its head moved, and looking around at the mess in the room, it lifted its arms in the air, waving its small hands. Soon, everything was once again categorized, all neatly placed back on the shelves. Dandan looked at the shelves for a long while, letting out a giggle, and just when it was about show Heshi so she could praise it, it noticed her staring at the 8 jade boxes flying around the room with anxiousness. The antennae on its small head swayed, and suddenly understanding, it waved a claw in the air. Soon after, the light surrounding the 8 jade boxes flickered, and with a whoosh, they flew towards Heshi, abruptly stopping in front of her. Heshi stared blankly, confused about what had just happened, when Dandan used its small and short legs to run to her, pulled a corner of her clothes, and boasted, "Mother, you see, I've tidied it all up. I also helped Mother catch these disobedient boxes. Mother, aren't I awesome? Don't get angry again, okay?" Heshi touched its small head, praising it. Seeing it roll about in happiness, she couldn't help but laugh. "Whether it's in an egg or this unknown shape, this little guy behaves like a 5-year-old child." Heshi picked up one of the jade boxes, first trying to open it using spiritual power, and when that failed, she used her divine sense to probe it. Unexpectedly, as soon as her divine sense touched the jade box surrounded by light, it was as if she had used a key to open a lock. The light around the jade box disappeared, and it then heavily landed on Heshi's hands. Seeing Heshi's puzzled expression, Dandan's antennae perched upright on its small head, and with a crisp and clear, childlike voice, it said, "Because Mother is the owner of Shumi Palace, these jade boxes recognize Mother's divine sense imprint. Other people have no way to open these jade boxes." Heshi suddenly understood, and collecting the remaining 7 jade boxes, she hurriedly opened them. Soon, the boxes were emptied, and everything inside was arranged neatly in front of Heshi. A hard-shelled egg the size of a chicken egg, 2 black-colored pills with unknown properties, and 5 jade slips. Heshi sat cross-legged on the ground, examining the things in front of her, unsure of what to start with. She beckoned Dandan over. "Dandan, do you know what these things are?" Dandan scratched its antennae with a small, stubby hand, confusion across its face. However, when it noticed the jade slips, its eyes lit up like it suddenly recalled something. Running over, it pulled one of the jade slips from the pile, handing it to Heshi. "Mother, I remembered. Grandpa Shumi said that he left Mother some guides. He told me to tell Mother that after the Spirit Firmament Palace door opened, to first look at this. Yes, it's this jade slip." Heshi's eyes shone, and taking the jade slip, her mind quickly sank into it. Chapter 139, New Harvest. Shumi Palace, also known as Montuashan Mansion, was created by a Shumi Taoist using a myriad of the world's spiritual objects. Refined over many years, it has now become a divine artifact. Since the beginning, when the Mi Luo and Xian Luo continents were formed, there were rumors. These rumors said that whoever possessed Shumi Palace obtained heavenly law, and that whoever obtained heavenly law would rule all lands under heaven. Therefore, the person who inherits this divine artifact must be descended from a divine bloodline. They must harbor virtuous thoughts and beneficence towards common people, otherwise, they will be devoured whole by heavenly law itself. Shumi Palace is divided into 9 palaces and 81 doors. The 9 palaces are Spirit Firmament, Black Firmament, Green Firmament, Blue Firmament, Scarlet Firmament, Jade Firmament, Amethyst Firmament, Highest Firmament, and Divine Firmament. Each palace has 9 doors, and each of the 9 doors have a set location. But if the 9 doors open all together, a formation will be activated and the 9 doors will disappear, changing into a palace instead. Heshi continued to read, discovering that in addition to storing treasures in Spirit Firmament Palace, the biggest feature here is the time stagnation. Of course, this kind of time stagnation could only be useful for storing foods as it was unable to be used for cultivation, so its only function is keeping food fresh. When Heshi went to look at the information detailing the other palaces, she found that the text was covered by a layer of white mist, causing it to be unreadable. It seems that the information will only be readable once the palaces are unlocked. Moreover, looking at the meaning of this guide, it appeared that each palace served a different purpose. Inside each palace there are probably more treasures concealed, so once all of the palaces are open, there would be a large sum of money, enough that it could make one very wealthy. Unsatisfied by the lack of information, Heshi put the guide down and picked up the remaining jade slips. In these 4 jade slips, 3 contained the same type of content. They were ancient records from the Shumi Taoist, called the All Living Things Record. The All Living Things Record was divided into sections documenting spiritual plants, spiritual beasts, and spiritual tools. Everything that the Shumi Taoist had seen throughout their life was described inside, and instead of vague details, each characteristic, as well as the locations of where they could be found, was documented with great care. It included information about all kinds of rare treasures, rare birds, and unusual beasts. There was even a clear image of each thing accompanying the jade slip. Wasn't the All Living Things record like a version of the Compendium of Materia Medica, 1? Heshi had been afraid that because she herself is a newbie in this different world, that she wouldn't be able to recognize or understand anything and be considered a country bumpkin. Now she doesn't need to be worried. By the time Heshi had reached the last jade slip, she was positively overjoyed. her previously neutral expression transforming into a brilliant smile. Recorded in the last jade slip is the knowledge on how to refine pills, written by Old Man Shumi himself. Called the Overflowing Cauldron Pill Scripture, it lists the prescription for every kind of precious pill. In her previous life, Heshi was known as an accomplished doctor with excellent medical expertise, so when she arrived in this strange cultivation world, of course she wanted to learn how to refine pills. But unfortunately in Miluo continent, becoming a doctor is a scarce profession. The art of pill refining is secretly passed down between family members, or between master and disciple. If you were able to find a book regarding pill refining at the market, describing its basic foundation, it would be priceless. And yet here this jade slip regarding pill refining was found, listing in detail all kinds of medicine ingredients and prescription combinations. Combinations detailing the choosing and usage, how to pair them, contradictory medicines, and even how to refine fire attribute and temperature control. So once Heshi saw this, she exclaimed in joy. "Mother, I'm hungry. How about you roast this egg for me to eat?" Heshi, immersed in the overflowing cauldron pill scripture, extricated herself with reluctance as Dandan's eager voice reached her ears. Heshi turned her head in surprise, and seeing Dandan holding something round, she couldn't stop black lines from forming on her forehead. "Isn't that the nameless egg from one of the jade boxes? You're not allowed to eat that. I'll go out now to find food for you, so behave and take good care of the egg for me. If you dare eat the egg, don't ever think about eating anything in the future." 1. Materia medica equals Latin for medical material. Here it refers to a collection of medical books. For more infos. Chapter 140, Seeing Zhu Ke again. What a joke, this is a treasure Old Man Shumi left. Maybe one day it would hatch into a divine beast, so if she let Dandan eat it, wouldn't she cry to death with regret? Dandan blinked its big eyes towards Heshi. "I won't eat the egg." "Mother, how about you take me out so we can eat together, I'll be obedient." Heshi's brows raised. Staring at its eye-catching appearance, the corner of her mouth couldn't help but raise, and shaking her head she said, "For the time being, no. There are a lot of bad people outside, if they catch and cook you, what would you do? You better stay in the space for now, I will bring you delicious food." Old Man Shumi had said that Dandan's identity will trigger greed and desire in humans. Her current strength is too weak, how could she dare to casually bring this little guy out? Once it heard that bad people would want to catch him, Dandan's small antennae trembled with fear, leaving it no choice but to quit asking about going out. Feeling aggrieved, it held the egg as it pitifully said, "Then mother, you should quickly bring in food for me to eat." Dandan hungry, after saying that, its small face rubbed against the eggshell. Heshi has good vision and noticed that when Dandan rubbed against the egg, a faint light seemed to be emitted from within. Putting aside thoughts of the egg, she picked up the two strange pills and sniffed them. Yet without being able to figure out what they were for, and not wanting to randomly eat them, she tossed them back into a jade box, deciding to temporarily leave them for now. Withdrawing from her space, Heshi let out a long sigh of relief, her mood brighter than it had been since she had awoken. As expected, now that her strength is increasing and she finally has the ability to defend herself, she is at last able to feel a sense of security. Touching her grumbling stomach, Heshi got up and walked out of the room. Yet as she reached the inner courtyard, she stared blankly as before her eyes is a gorgeous palace with an exquisite garden on display. Just a moment ago when she was inside the room, she had noted the unfamiliar decorations and furnishings, but it wasn't until this moment, seeing this luxurious and noble residence, that she felt that her intuition was right. When she was losing consciousness after being attacked by the assassins from Drought Demon Organization, she vaguely remembered seeing a familiar face and hearing a grave voice in her ears that caused her to feel relieved. Nangongyu, that must have been Nangongyu. Heshi covered her chest with a hand and felt her heart palpitating incessantly, a grateful expression slowly emerging in her eyes. If she's not mistaken, only Nangongyu has the Yuan-Yang fruit, and only Nangongyu knew how to unseal her muddled dantian. Moreover, When she was being chased, the imprint on her hairpin protected her from a fatal strike, so Nan Gongyu certainly would have known of her situation. So, he saved her life in the nick of time, as well as helping her unseal her dantian. Thinking of this, Heshi's footsteps accelerated. At this very moment she was eagerly wanting to see Nan Gongyu, she didn't want to delay meeting him for another second. Looking for someone to ask for directions, Heshi had barely made it to the courtyard's gate, when she heard noises from outside. The voice of the man was very familiar to Heshi as it belonged to Bai Hu, that freeloader who would come to her courtyard every day for food and drink. But that woman's voice, at first Heshi thought it was unfamiliar, yet as she continued listening, she felt it was somewhat familiar. Listening to them, she heard Bai Hu's voice cold with disapproval, "Zhu Ke, don't cause trouble again. This is Master's order, don't tell me you won't even obey Master's orders." "Zhu Ke. Zhu Ke." Heshi suddenly realized that no wonder she felt this woman's voice was unfamiliar yet familiar, and that she thought it was faintly annoying. So as it turns out, it was that arrogant woman who claimed she came to present pills to Heshi by her master's order, yet who tried to kill her instead. Saying all this, the person who saved her must really be Nan Gongyu. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.